Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Paul. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Luce.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Dublé. Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Lehegara. Monsieur le Deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves. Madame le Deputy Gardner. Monsieur le Deputy Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Farnham. Madame le Deputy Moore. Monsieur le Deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Joseph. Monsieur le Deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Poré. Monsieur le Deputy War.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Scott. Monsieur le Deputy Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Binet.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Howell. Monsieur le Deputy Binet. Monsieur le Deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Stevenson. Monsieur le Deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération étant accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous ennuie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Dublé.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Défaut.
Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Farnham.
Défaut.
Monsieur le Deputy Joseph. Madame le Deputy Poré. Madame le Deputy Scott.
Défaut.
Madame le Deputy Stevenson.
parental responsibility. Les États sont constitués. Very well, we continue with the debate on the amendment. The amendment to P.74, and I have next listed to speak Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Later this morning, I expect to speak as the chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, but right now I speak as an individual member. I love learning languages, and it was very useful when I lived abroad. There's no argument that learning foreign languages isn't useful. But this is not about me or other states members' individual experiences. It's about forcing language study on those 14 to 16-year-olds who do not wish to continue studying language. We heard yesterday from many states members who spoke of their own experiences in learning foreign languages and how useful that had been for them. Well, that was then, and this is now. Things change and we are living in a different world. There are new ways to learn, and many of our young people are feeling overwhelmed. But our schools do offer language teaching, and it's accessible for older children who wish to continue learning a foreign language. Jersey children already receive instruction in a foreign language. They already have access to learn French. The difference is that this proposition will make a foreign language compulsory for 14 to 16-year-olds. So that means all those who do not want to continue studying a foreign language will be made to do so, and that is not a good idea. I'm not comfortable with more compulsory subjects being imposed on this age group. They can choose to continue studying a language, which is right. At this stage, it should be a choice, not an imposition. We must all be aware of the increase in anxiety and mental health problems in children and young people, and we should enable them to make their own choices. Imposing further study on this age group, for those who do not want to study a foreign language, is going to add to their stress and anxiety. And it's no use referring to the example of other countries. They will have different ways of study set up. If we want to be more like them, it would take an overhaul of how children are taught and not just tinkering at the edges. For these reasons, I support the amendment, which will ensure that the Curriculum Council reviews this matter and will consider the effect on 14 to 16-year-olds of having more compulsory subjects they must study. If there is a way to make foreign languages compulsory for this age group, that will fit in with all their other subjects and can be done without causing distress, that would be really good. But we won't know that without the review. As Deputy Alves has already said, it would be irresponsible to proceed without a review, and therefore I support the amendment.
Deputy Dublet.
Thank you, sir. I was listening with interest to the debate yesterday, as I had not made up my mind about which way to vote on this. And as a qualified teacher, when we have debates about schools and the curriculum, I'm usually very interested, but and this is the only thing that I will probably say about my own personal experience. I'm not particularly proficient at languages myself, so this is not an area that I'm as passionate about in terms of education. But I do want to speak about passion, because something that came across to me from several of the speakers yesterday, and indeed Deputy Tadier himself, was the passionate desire to have this in our schools. And Deputy Tadier has brought several propositions along these lines over the years, and I do have respect for Deputy Tadier and for the basis of his work. He's a very experienced states member, and I think he has a level of understanding of what our population needs. So I did listen yesterday. And it was interesting to hear lots of personal experiences from states members. And I'm not going to speak about my own, but what I am going to speak about, and this is something that I like to base as many decisions as possible on, is research. So as well as being a teacher, I studied psychology at university, and part of that was child development. And one of the things that I learned when I was studying child development was that children are predisposed, even before birth, to learning language. So first of all, I wanted to challenge some of the statements that were made yesterday. I think one statement that was made was, we are not all linguists. And actually, the research on the human brain says the opposite, that actually we universally are all linguists. Even me, who I don't feel particularly good at speaking French, but I can speak a bit of French. All of us, all of our brains, from before birth, were predisposed to picking up the language of whichever culture we happen to be born in. And studies have shown that babies, even very soon after they were born, the way that they start to babble and make pre-speech sounds follows the cadence and the rhythm of the language that those adults around them are speaking. And I just find that fascinating. So our brains are set up to do this, to acquire language that we hear around us. Now, what I didn't know about, so my area of specialism in terms of child development was very much early years. I have to admit, I don't really understand teenagers. We're talking about this age group, aren't we, the 14 to 16 age group. So I did some research. And what I found is that around this age, in fact, just after the cut-off period that Deputy Tadier is proposing, the age 16, around age 17, something happens in children's brains. And there is a critical window. And we see these critical development windows in other areas, such as writing and reading. So around age 6 to 7, many children children who've struggled with reading, just suddenly pick it up. And that's why in many countries they don't actually start to teach children to read until they're 6 or 7, because when those education systems have a really good understanding of child development, they know that actually they need to play until up at that point. So I've learned something from this debate. This has sparked some learning for me. And I wasn't aware that actually around age 17, children, young people, are highly skilled learners of language. There is a critical window which falls off a cliff around age 17, 18. And I think that giving young people the opportunity to have that language learning before their brain changes and that critical window passes, and it is gone forever, that critical window. The research says that people can acquire languages after this age, but it's much harder, requires a lot more work. So in terms of us making a decision based upon, and I like to make my decisions based upon research, and also by listening to the views of my colleagues, which I have done today, I think actually this would be a really good thing to do and really beneficial to our young people. Because another thing that is universal to every human and every islander is the need for connection. And whilst children, yes, they will show preferences for different subjects and for different going into different industries, what is universal is the need to connect with other human beings. And that's the other thing that has convinced me on this, is that giving children that skill and teaching it to them at the right time when they can more easily acquire it gives them the ability to connect more widely, not just for our island and for our economy, but for themselves, to be able to communicate with other human beings. So for those reasons, I'm convinced on the need for language teaching up to age 16. And as well as the research, I'm also convinced by some of the data about countries in the EU. So 87% of pupils in upper secondary education learn English as a foreign language. And I think it's also about respect, because I think we have a certain amount of privilege as a jurisdiction that mostly speaks English. When we travel, most of the time we can get by using English, can't we? But if we have an additional language, when we travel or when we interact with people who have English as a second language, it also shows that we have gone that extra mile, and it shows respect to try and communicate with people, with our closest neighbours, France, in their own language. So the research on child development has convinced me. The stats that I've seen about the rest of the EU, about our neighbours in Europe, about what's happening there, has convinced me. And I'm going to be voting against this amendment for reasons stated by, I think it was Deputy Gardner, that I have the greatest respect for the Curriculum Council, and they give very valuable advice to the Minister. But today, I would like the Assembly to advise the Minister. I think we have examined this issue very thoroughly during the debate, and I would like the Assembly to advise the Minister to go ahead with this. Thank you, sir.
So Mary's Defo and Deputy Farnham, please.
Indeed, Defo is raised on the Chief Minister. Constable St. Warren.
So it was just to actually advise the Assembly and yourself that I've got a hospital appointment at 10:30 and I'll be away for approximately an hour.
Thank you very much for that, Constable St. John.
Thank you, sir. So I've been drawn to speak following several contributions yesterday. The debate is in danger of swinging from what should we do about languages for our young people to more of a debate about our heritage. So later this year we'll be celebrating with our VIPs, those people who lived through the occupation. Many will have memories of being taught German in school and not through choice. Many would have arrived at school not being able to speak English, but speaking either French or Gérié, and some would have got into trouble if they spoke in their first language at school rather than English. So back then, 3 languages causing a problem. Fast forward to today. So last night's JEP reported on a recent visit to Rouge-Bourne School. The article spoke about the fact that there are 31, yes, 31 languages spoken at that school. Unfortunately, not all pupils arrive with a good grasp of their home language, making learning English difficult for some. So last weekend, whilst I was driving, I was listening to the radio. An article that piqued my interest was one about AI, a subject that came up in questions yesterday. Today, there is technology that can translate immediately into many languages, and the example given in the programme was Japanese. The ability to scan a page and get immediate translation, and the ability for people to speak their own language and have it translated so as to facilitate a conversation between 2 or more people who have no understanding of others' languages. So, should we be compulsory teaching our youngsters a second language? Or should we be teaching them how to embrace AI and other technologies that will open up new exciting horizons and at the same time open up those commercial opportunities that the Economic Minister spoke about yesterday? So I have experience of working in a school, and when I did, there was a lot of interest in Mandarin. Parents were happy to pay for their children to learn this language after school, and to my surprise, the lessons proved popular. They were popular with those who wanted to do it, those who wanted to try. It certainly wasn't for everyone, as other clubs proved more popular. The main thing, sir, was that there was choice. So in this debate, where is the voice of the child, the parent, and the teacher? Are we, as has been suggested, the 49 experts, are we going to tell these groups what's best for them without engaging with them? Have those members who have spoken against the amendment and who signed the pledge to put children first forgotten their commitment? So the Minister isn't saying he won't look at languages. If he was, he would have encouraged us to vote against this proposition. The Minister is asking us to allow him to work with his department to see what is achievable. I would hope that the Minister has heard the feedback about the Jersey Curriculum Council and would encourage him to take a look at this in the coming weeks and perhaps review their terms of reference. As one former head teacher explained to me, if you've got additional revenue, use it to support the children who are falling behind. In closing, sir, I urge members to support the amendments and then to support the proposition as amended. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Going to Deputy Hegarty.
Thank you, sir. And I think, like the Constable of St John's, I had a light bulb moment on the way home last night. When I arrived home, did a little bit of research too, and I'm certainly no expert, unlike Deputy Doublé, in what she has in relation to qualifications. However, this is a little brief. The debate surrounding the compulsory study of languages for teenagers encompasses various arguments that highlight potential drawbacks of such a mandate. One significant argument against making language study compulsory is the varying levels of language proficiency and educational needs amongst young people. Research indicates that young people from socio-ecologically disadvantaged backgrounds often face difficult challenges that can impede their academic performance. Forcing these students to engage in language studies without addressing their additional foundational language skills may exacerbate their educational challenges rather than alleviate them. This concern is often underscored by findings that suggest a lack of tailored support for adolescents with language impairments, which could lead to feelings of inadequacy and disengagement from the educational process. And more research goes on, but I don't really want to actually continue with it. My view is straightforward. We actually need to ensure that all of our children that go into education come out of that process with the most appropriate levels of their own abilities. And that, sir, may not be a language. It may be an ability to make a cupboard out of wood. It may be an ability to make a very nice weather vane out of a piece of metal. It may be all sorts of different things, and young people are very computer-minded. I, like the Constable of St John, on the way home, thought about young people and their choice. We provide them, sir, with a lot of rules and a lot of advice about how they need to behave, how they, what laws there are, and what they actually have to do in order to keep out of the trouble with the police, etc. What my fear is, sir, is we're now trying to actually step on their toes in relation to their choices within the educational system. I fully accept that students will have to do maths and English, but I think, sir, they should be allowed to make their choices alongside their parents and what their actual aspirations are moving forward. I think that we as an island and as an assembly need to ensure, and I would be fully supportive of all of the elements in relation to providing as much education in relation to their own language, ensuring that they're able to do languages and able to do 2 languages if they choose to do so. But, sir, I am not in favour of actually making our students do compulsory language at GCSE level. From that aspect, I think it is important that they are choices for young people, sir, and choices for them moving forward, not for what we think is right for them. I, sir, didn't sign the pledge that originally came up in relation to putting children first. I deferred that decision, and that decision was deferred until the Assembly at the time banned the smacking of children. And that, sir, for me, was the turning point to which I said, and I genuinely believed, that people were going to put children first. And so for me, sir, I'm going to put the child first. I don't see anywhere in any of the paperwork, and sir, I can be corrected. Have we spoken to the Children's Commissioner? I don't think we have. Does the CREA suggest that this is the right thing for children? Yes, sir, I genuinely believe that if we can all speak a second, third or fourth language, there are benefits, without a doubt. Somebody else also mentioned, sir, yesterday about our heritage and how important it was to speak a language and culture. Sir, I don't necessarily think that that's the case, because not everybody can have those linguistic skills. And yes, I fully appreciate what Deputy Tadier said about the fact that our brains are geared in that sort of way. So I've been learning French for many years. I'm still not proficient, but I managed in the last 2 years to get my first exam in it. So from my perspective, sir, I think we have to allow our young people to make the choices that are right for them under the guidance of their families and parents and their teachers and the school. I'm very supportive, as I said, of the facilities to be able to provide them to do those language skills if they choose to do so. But I will not support compulsory language skills, even though I think it is absolutely valuable for people to be able to speak a second or third language, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. And we've heard a lot yesterday about everyone's own experiences and a lot of reflecting back to the past. But actually, I don't think this proposition is a romanticised proposition about Jersey's past. It is about clearly stating what we need to equip future generations. The world is rapidly changing around us, and I'm not talking about a gradual change. The world is literally imploding in the last week alone. If you're not worried now, you should be. So we need to look to the future and what skills are needed for all children on this island. And what are we actually talking about in this proposition? It's just an extension of a skill that children are already told they need to have between the age of 7 and 13. What this proposition, and not supporting this amendment, would mean just extending it for 2 years. All this language we have just heard this morning makes it that it sounds like it's a huge imposition on our children. We are talking about an extension of 2 years. We already force our children from the age of 7 to 13 to learn another language. Why? Why do we do that? Is it a waste of time? Is it imposing on something on somebody? We don't speak about forcing students to study physics or biology or maths. The Conotab of St John just talked about using AI for learning a language so we wouldn't need to. Maths, there's a calculator. Why do we have to have maths as a core subject in GCSEs? We could stop that at 13. Because we could do our GCSEs perfectly well with a calculator. Does this also mean, because I hear from the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, I heard that we're forcing children, and she wants to put children first. Well, I would like to ask the Minister, what about uniforms? Children definitely don't like to wear uniforms. Should we give them the choice now? I hope so. So we can say from the age of 7, you don't need to have a uniform. And I can also tell you, if we're putting children first, that every day in the car when I take my 11-year-old to school, he says to me very clearly he thinks he should be paid to go to school because he hates it. If we are putting children first, are we now going to listen to my 11-year-old and say, okay, that's fine, we'll pay you to go to school? I give that opportunity to any of those children that are hearing this debate outside to put that to their parents and then also to the Minister, that maybe they could get paid to go to school. So what is it? Why is this proposition asking us just to extend the language by 2 years? It's because when you're from the age of 14, you probably start understanding why it's important to learn a language. You are becoming more mature in understanding the world outside of your front door, outside the world of your home, and understand there is huge benefits to learning another language, not just because of being able to speak, but also about culture. about hearing amazing different kinds of music, about exploring the world, about understanding each other, and maybe even falling in love with someone that doesn't necessarily speak your first language. Language is also about, speaking it is about confidence. And many of you yesterday talked about that, and actually I would say most of you could probably speak another language, but it comes from confidence and understanding that actually it doesn't matter about making mistakes. You know, we hear make mistakes all the time with those who are speaking English as a second or third language. It doesn't matter. But a lot of us who speak English as a first language don't have that confidence to be able to speak it because we think, oh no, I don't want to make all the mistakes. And a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old, suddenly, what benefits they could have from actually starting going, I have the confidence to make mistakes, I have the confidence to speak out, and it doesn't matter if only 50% is understood. The point is that I'm trying. So those skills are extremely important, I think, because it opens doors to different cultures, it sharpens your mind, it gives you confidence, it helps you with the cognitive abilities like problem solving, creativity, and even memory. But it's not just about that, because I come back to what I said at the beginning. World is changing. The competitiveness in this world is changing. Jobs are changing. And if we want to equip our students with skills that give them that competitive edge to go in the future job market, and I know there's a lot of discussions about keeping youngsters on the island, but they also have a choice to leave if they want to. And can we give them those abilities to go not just north, and they probably won't want to go to America. So where else are they going to go? They can go just across the way to be able to go into Europe and actually find different job markets out there. Because as we heard from Deputy Tadier, most European countries and students speak 2 or more languages. So it's the norm. So actually, we're undermining our youngsters by not giving them an ability for another language. And I just want to say about the Connotables of St. John talks about the fact that in Rouge-Bouillon there is, I can't remember the exact, 31 languages spoken. Wow. So those students already are more competitively advantaged than our monolingual students in Jersey. This proposition gives that equality of those who don't have the advantage of speaking another language at home, because it is an advantage. And having got bilingual children, I'm sorry, it is not a disadvantage that you have second language, and you may be longer time understanding and gripping many different topics, but wow, once you get it, you go. And you have all those abilities that the research says about cognitive memory, etc. And so we're actually disadvantaging many of our own students who don't speak another language, because more and more there are those in the island who speak more than one language. So I think we are absolutely giving those with monolingual a disadvantage and equipping them for the future language. Just as an example, my husband speaks 5 languages. English is his 4th language. We can go pretty much anywhere in this world for that, because of that. I'll have to catch up with him, but I'm trying. But that's normal. That's completely normal for him and the Netherlands that they can do that. And I want to just bring that back to what I've said earlier as well about the world imploding around us. Part of learning a language, and I'm talking about we already force our children to learn a language from the age of 7 and 13. We're talking about extending it for 2 more years. And why is that? It also fosters empathy and global awareness, helping us to understand and appreciate the perspectives of others. And we absolutely need that now. In the world that is happening now, I cannot believe anyone would think that we need to be a closed-off English-speaking country without having 2 years more extension to help those who are getting more mature, more understanding of that global awareness, to be able to say yes actually we are global citizens. We absolutely respect other cultures. We respect and empathise with those who are going through the hard times. And you have that from just understanding language. And I looked up GCSE French and the themes that students learn in GCSE French. And the themes over the years is theme 1, identity and culture. Theme 2, local, national, international and global areas of interest. And theme 3, current and future study and employment. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's exactly what we're talking about, is that French is not just about learning the structure of a language and being able to communicate. The French GCSE is put into a structure that helps you understand that wider implication of another culture, another understanding, and not just France, because there are many other places who speak French around the world, and we know that because we are members of APF. It's not just about going to one country. We are talking about having access to so many more cultures and understanding, and you get that through the understanding of not just learning the structure of a language. And for me, as dyslexic, I can tell you structure, even English, is the most painful thing. But learning languages and learning that through understanding about culture and about the kind of views of the other country from looking at global things or national identity or all those things really makes you understand and get to know French much better. So I come back maybe to something, and I finish off with something that's really close to my heart, and I suppose it comes back to Jersey, and something that I picked up as soon as I moved back to Jersey, is the twinning associations. I absolutely love our twinning association. In St John's, the Connotab knows that we have great time with Le Tadier when they come here or we go there. We don't speak very well French. They don't speak very well English. We have the best time because we are learning from each other, because we are supporting each other and know that actually the languages aren't that, we don't have to be perfect in our language. We can use a lot of hands and a lot of laughter to get what we, to understanding. And we share understandings. For example, my family from Le Tadier, the husband works in inseminating cows in Normandy. And so when he came to Jersey, I took him to a farm. I was very gracious to phone up one of our local farmers, and we went round, and it was fantastic trying to translate how Jersey farmers work and how you inseminate cows in Jersey in French. I learnt a lot that day. How are we going to recruit or make the twinning associations thrive? Just this small part of our culture and our connections. And how are we going to do that if we don't have youngsters who at least feel confident that they can make the hand gestures and laugh and have that communication, even if it's not perfect? And for me, that is why this extension of the 2 years to make it into when youngsters are that more mature and understanding of why it's important for a language is why I will not be supporting this amendment, and I will be supporting the full proposition. Thank you.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I was also not intending to speak in this, so my speech will not be as coherent as some of the ones we've heard over the course of this debate. I would just like to make the very obvious point, with my Treasury Minister hat on, that there is no pot of extra money for this, and if we want extra money for this, then the Minister will have to make a growth bid in next year's budget, and for this year he will have to reprioritise his spending from another area in the department. That is fiscal, the position we're in. I don't have a pot of money to devote to this, so the money will have to come from elsewhere. Secondly, and I feel I've said this before, I don't think anybody here is challenging the usefulness of learning a language. This isn't about whether or not we should learn languages and whether it's good for us. Of course, it's good for us, for our thought processes. I went to a presentation, or I spoke to somebody only last week who had some slides that I think suggested that the youthful brain, in terms of language skills, was fully mature by the age of 5 or 6. So the notion that they're sucking up like a sponge any language at 16 or 15, I think may be misplaced. French, we have a continuing obsession in this assembly, I believe, with French. I have no objection to French. French was a language I learned at school, as long with the other option being German. I read a very interesting article some years ago by John Simpson, who was a very famous, you will all remember, foreign correspondent. And this article was about the decline of French as a language of diplomacy. Someone mentioned French as a language of diplomacy yesterday, I believe. And he said in this article, yes, that was the case. All diplomatic engagement was done in French. But for some 30 or 40 years, that had been changing because the wealthy ruling classes in numerous countries in the Middle East and Asia, instead of educating the children in France, decided to start educating the children in Oxford, in Cambridge, in Harvard, in Yale. They were sending them to English-speaking countries to be educated both at secondary and further level. So the language of diplomacy is rarely French. It is now English because that is how people are educated worldwide now. Deputy Jeune says the world is changing. Yes, it is, absolutely. We want to equip our children for the jobs of the future. But what are the jobs of the future? Actually, we have no idea. Children at school now may very well be coming out of school, coming out of university in 20 years' time to jobs that actually don't exist at the moment. We need to focus on IT and technology. Those are the important languages that children need to learn, as well as another spoken language if they wish. And if they wish to speak Spanish or German or Italian, any one of those languages may be of more use to them than French. A friend of mine wanted to go and work in New York several years ago and was told he couldn't unless he spoke Spanish. In large parts of the United States, people grow up speaking Spanish as the first language. If you want to be a doctor and go and work in the Middle East or South America, French won't necessarily help you. If we were really looking to the future, and I've said this before, if we were really looking to the future, I firmly believe that the languages we should be speaking our children are Mandarin, as the Constable St John mentioned, or Arabic. That would open up the world to our children, not just French. I absolutely support, and I'm sure the Minister, we all support the teaching of languages. But what I struggle with personally is the teaching of French as a compulsion. Someone may want to, people have limited things they can study. If you want to be a doctor, you will be expected to have a heavy focus on sciences. And people can shake their heads. You are expected to focus on science. If you want to do a language, why should you be forced to do French if you really want to do Spanish?
So would the Minister give
People
way
have
as
to
a
have a choice.
point of order or correction?
Well, do you wish to give way?
Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, yeah.
It's just that the Minister's talking about being forced to study French, but this doesn't force anyone to study French. It's about giving a choice of languages.
I think that's a speech, Deputy.
It's just a point of fact, so this isn't what we're debating.
I'm sorry. Points of fact can still be contained in speeches. The fact that the nature of the communication doesn't determine whether or not it's a speech. If you're going to put corrective information in, then that must be done in the ordinary way.
I was just asking...
And this is a debate on the amendment. It's not a debate on the main proposition. Yes.
Sir, I apologise to the Deputy. I have slightly misread what he is saying in paragraph B is all secondary schools should continue to offer a choice of at least 2 modern languages other than English, one of which must be French. That, therefore, does create a preference for French, and a school may decide that they want to do German and Italian, or Italian and Spanish, or Russian, or Mandarin and Spanish, but they are being compelled to teach one of those choices must be French. And I don't think we are setting our sights widely enough by insisting that that of the two modern languages, one must be French. Schools should be free to offer other languages if that is what they want and if that's what their communities want, Portuguese and Mandarin. Anyway, there is still a heavy focus here on French. Nobody is arguing about the benefit of modern languages. I think we're all agreed on that. But I do think I support the Minister on this, and I think the element of over-focus on French is not necessarily going to do our children any good in the future. Thank you, sir.
Sir, may I raise the defo on Deputy Alves?
Yes, defo is raised on Deputy Alves. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate this has been a long debate and there have been some excellent speeches, so I hope not to take too much time. But bringing the point back to the amendment and the rights and wrongs of it, I do hope that the Assembly will vote against this amendment. It strikes me, sir, that we heard yesterday from the Minister for Children that he described this proposition and voting against the amendment as supporting something which he called a blind leap of faith. If we compare that with the current situation with the proposed health reforms, which have been described as being entirely experimental, it appears to me, sir, rather incongruous that we should adopt this amendment because on the one hand, when something suits the Council of Ministers, it is based on fact and evidence. On the other, when it suits them, they prefer not to listen to the evidence and the research. And I know, sir, that the Minister in this event is a scientist himself, but that minister has also, at a later stage in his life, learnt an additional language, and I believe he has enjoyed his French lessons. But would it not have been more effective, and does the science not back it up, sir, that his brain would have been better conditioned had he maintained the study of that additional language at an earlier stage?
Point of order, sir. I actually studied O-level French. It was O-level. I was quite good at it, actually, sir. And,
actually, that is
condition.
absolutely not a point of order, unless you want me to rule that you have studied O-level French or haven't studied O-level French.
Just so I think I was being, I think it was quite disparaging that I hadn't.
It's not a, I think points of order, Deputy will forgive me for saying, shouldn't be used as an opportunity for giving information. Sorry, sir. It's not a point of order.
Thank you,
carry
sir.
on,
I believe I was making a speech. So we heard an excellent speech from Deputy Doublé about the science of the brain and the impact of language learning on that brain. And so, sir, I hope that the scientists in the Council of Ministers will think deeply about that evidence and that research, which suggests that the proposition is absolutely in order and there is no need to revert back to the Curriculum Council for advice on this matter. Because if we really aspire to deliver the very best in education for our children, and that has always been one of the USPs of Jersey, the standard of education that we have provided to our young citizens as a small island community has always been something that has drawn islanders or drawn people to the island to work and to contribute to our economy and to keep our children here also, because it has been a fine thing. And so if we all value education, then we should be certainly voting against this amendment and supporting Deputy Tadier, because we aspire for better for our children. We do not want to meet the standards of the United Kingdom. We want to meet a Jersey standard. And the use of language is something that has enriched our island for many, many centuries. And it is something that when we look forward to the future, we should be broader than the Treasury Minister, sir. We should embrace languages and the benefits that that provides, not only the personal experience of the person who develops an additional skill and is able to go out and communicate with others around the world. I certainly, for my own part, being a fluent French speaker and also dabbling in a bit of Italian and Spanish too, understand that great benefit and have enjoyed being able to communicate with others around the world in our work with the APF in particular, but when meeting other members of the worldwide community on a political level. It is something that brings us together. It is something that strengthens the person, and it's something that I'm very pleased to have in my array of skills, however limited they might be, sir. And so I do hope that members will aspire for a better future for our children and to defeat this amendment, which it certainly deserves to be done.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. Flashback to O-level French then, Mr. Cooley, sir. I was convinced he was French because it was immersion French in those days. I was very convinced. Just a little story to start with, lighten the load. I've got as long as I want, haven't I, sir?
Yes.
Marvellous.
And you will undoubtedly endear members to you for using it.
Merci, monsieur. Get yourself comfortable, everyone, and sit up straight, because you need to listen carefully. I'm only joking, sir. And I can remember French. It was a wonderful subject, and I did do it. But I also did sciences, and I did sociology. 11 O-level, sir, 11 Bs. I'm very proud. B for boy is what my teacher said to me. Not a scrap of homework, but I got through exams. I was good at exams until I got to A-level, but there you go. And so what does that mean? That means, yes, of course. This lad who grew up in East London did O-level French. It was, I don't think it was compulsory, it was an option. My art teacher said to me, do French, which really upset me actually, but we won't go into that now. And so I took French as an option because it was an interesting thing to do. But what I want to do, sir, is to look, let's get back to the debate. I've started to sort of slightly flippantly. I want to speak seriously at the beginning of my response. And so the first thing I want to do, sir, I want this on Hansard, and perhaps I noticed members of the press here got a chance to get something across. So I want to start by offering an unreserved apology to the hard-working, skilled, experienced, voluntary members of the Jersey Curriculum Council. It's not a paid post. It happens after they've finished their day jobs, from 4 till 6:30, usually the meetings are. Sadly, yesterday, several members chose to call into question the integrity of these individuals who make up the council. 13 individuals from across key stages. And it is chaired, sir, not by myself, but for the lead person in school improvement, I believe. That's the last person who chaired it. And on behalf of myself, Deputy Alves and Conatar Viber, I can assure you we do not share the views of Deputy Tadier that any review into this would be a fait accompli. We do not share the view of Deputy Ballas, who thinks that they work at a leisurely pace. And we do not share the views of Deputy Kovacs that teachers on the council could be biased based on workload. The members of the Curriculum Council know about curriculum, the reality of what a curriculum is. They deliver it, the content, the way it builds over the years, the way it is assessed, whether it's formative assessment, is it going to be terminal assessment, is it going to be assessment as it goes along, which percentage of that curriculum will be terminal assessment, which will be continuous assessment. These are all things that I'm sure you all know about in this assembly, sir, because you're making judgment on them. I'm sure everybody in here is an expert on the way that a curriculum works because you're about to make a judgment on it. That's great, so I'll explain. And I know I'm already preaching to people who know, sir, but we'll go through it anyway. So myself and the other members of the Cyprus team respect the professionalism of the Curriculum Council. And I would invite members, Deputy Kovacs and Deputy Tadier, Deputy Morel, to come to the next meeting and explain why you see their role as so biased, unprofessional and inappropriate for this type of work. Because I know that I'm going to have that conversation, even though I don't agree with it. And sir, in terms of minutes of meetings from the Curriculum Council, I'll tell you what the Curriculum Council produced, sir, over the last year and a half. They produced an entire syllabus, an updated PHSE syllabus, which is applicable and deliverable. They produce deliverables, not just ideas and conversations like some parts of government do, and nice little reports that were put onto a shelf, but actual documents that are delivered in the classroom. And that's what the Curriculum Council do. And they do so with professionalism. Also, I think it's section, I think it's not called section 59, I can't remember what it is, means that the Curriculum Council can get people, I can't think of the word, co-opt, that's the word, sir, co-opt any members that they want to onto the council. And what I would expect to happen in this is that we have a lead advisor for languages, we have our language team, that they will be co-opted onto whatever work goes on into whether this is a viable and how it can be delivered. How could this be delivered realistically? Where are the teachers coming from? How would that be done? That hasn't been answered. How would it be paid for? That hasn't been answered. Will it be one syllabus, sir, for all schools, which means will mean a change for some schools, and also a competition as to which one is the most appropriate? But obviously the experts in this room would know the answer to that. And perhaps when people speak in the main debate, if we get there, they could talk about which syllabus they would choose because they know it so well. And there seems to be an awful amount of knowledge in this assembly, sir, about what's going on here and these judgments being made. So let's hear it later. Let's hear what syllabus would be advised. What is best for our children with a range of needs? Because, sir, without some sort of review in terms of the way this will work realistically, we are going to stumble into a change that will have a profound effect on what our children can choose. And I want to pick up on something else, analogies about crisps, which I found quite insulting for our young people, actually. Our young people at the age of year 9 now enter into a process of choosing options. And what they do is, and teachers work incredibly hard on this, through careers, through form time, through PHSE, through the work they do and what these options mean, through open evening, through options evenings, all of this work that goes on in our schools. I'm sure, I'm saying it, sir, but I'm sure every single member knows because they're experts. It's fine. Everybody already knows this, but I'll just point it out. And what they do is they make a choice. And these students in year 9 are looking ahead and thinking, okay, what do I want to do? What will I do at 16? What are my options open to me? I'm good to see Deputy Miles mentions the IB again. The reason IB was lost, there were not enough students. And there were not enough students because there's not enough joined up cooperation at post-16. Some of the work I'm trying to do now. So this will not make any difference to whether or not we do IB. But I think it's a great qualification, absolutely. So what those year 9 students do is they make a choice. And they think, I will do this and this and this. I want to do that as well. It will take me to that pathway. And lo and behold, they might do one subject, sir, that they simply enjoy, like music or dance or drama. Well, they might want to go into drama. They might want to be an actor. They might want to be famous, put Jersey on the world stage, which is a wonderful thing to see. But what we are about to say, if we're not careful, is, oh, no, you can't do that because we know best. We know best. And with some science, which I would suggest, I'm not a neurobiologist, I didn't realise there were neurobiologists in this assembly who know so much about brain science. I would say, sir, my view of most of the research in that is modern day phrenology, and we have to be very, very careful about the data that is produced. So let's take it with a pinch of salt. Now, sir, our language is useful, and Deputy Moore, who I will point out, sir, many of the people who spoke in favour in this were in government for 2 years and didn't act on this at all. Didn't take the opportunity, including the previous minister and assistant minister. It wasn't a priority then, but it may be made a priority now because it just seems the right thing to do. And the political football that is education be kicked around a little bit more, which I think is a real shame. But sir, what we're going to do here, if we're not careful, is without any form of investigation, research, consultation with teachers, staff, parents, other bodies, whatever they may be, according to the Curriculum Council, the professionals who look at that, to just say, and sir, I'm very interested to hear from the Deputy when he spoke, that this proposition is in principle. So this is not a proposition that is in principle, the main proposition. It is telling me, as a minister, and the department and schools, mainly the 11 to 16 schools, by the way, this will affect, that you will deliver a language to every single child in that school September 2026, regardless if it's appropriate for them or not. Or are we saying, actually, that's not the case? Because we're full of dichotomies here, sir, in what's been said so far in this debate, and I'd like to point them out. And every time one of these, I would point them out, but I've lost my bit of paper. I can remember it, I wrote it. And we're full of them. And it's really interesting that what we're going to do is we're going to make a decision, if we're not careful, to say, don't undertake any sort of investigation into the way this works, just do it. Because there's a heritage part. Well, as we just heard from the deputy, this may not be French that is delivered. It could be any modern language. It could be German, it could be Italian. I'm pleased to see that Deputy Renouf, sir, would be very pleased that his son could do German at last. It'd be marvellous. Italian, could be Spanish, could be Mandarin. What will happen in reality, sir, and the reality of schools is what needs to be understood here, is that schools will deliver what they have. Because recruitment of a significant number of teachers to just give this massive choice across the curriculum is a fantasy land. And I, sir, as Education Minister, do not want to employ teachers who are substandard, unable to deliver, or not fully qualified. So I want to have the best teachers who are fully qualified, know the way that schools work, can differentiate, that's a nice word, can be part of the inclusion agenda to include children with a particular needs. And I'm sure because everyone's an expert on there, they'll understand what I mean by ordinarily available support within the classroom. People can comment on that, how you would use ordinarily available support in the classroom when you teach for these children who you are forcing to do a language. Perhaps when you talk in the main debate, you can explain how you're going to do that. Because if you can't, then simply, sir, we shouldn't be making this judgment. This judgment should be made by those who know the best about it. And, sir, there are so many other things that I could say, and I'm going to actually, because I've got the stage. This notion that this is an amendment to kick things into the grass, and then, sir, the juxtaposition with a hospital. We're back to the hospital again. Marvellous. So we're using our children as a political football, and we need to stop doing that. This is not kicking something into the long grass. This is looking at a way in which we could deliver, if this is genuinely the will of this assembly, a provision that is correct, sustainable, and realistic. What I envisage doing, as I've done before with the nursery staff, is when we produce a report, I'll make a statement to the Assembly and face questions. I'm very happy to face questions, sir. Didn't have any this week. I felt a little bit left out. I'm very open and transparent in the way I do my job. I know my remit. I know about education. And what I would suggest I would do is that the report will come to me in December. I will publish that report. I will make a statement to the Assembly, and then you can ask me questions, and we've got a way forward. But instead of this, what this Assembly wants to do is to say, no, I'm the expert, we're the experts, you don't need to do this, you don't need to see how this will work, you don't need to include those people, just get on with it, and we'll hope for the best. And in the original proposition, there is nothing at all about staffing, costs, the impact on other staff. Because if you take away an option, what are you doing with the staff who teach that option? Which options are at risk? I would suggest, sir, RS is at risk. There are usually only one group in a school. What are we going to do with those teachers? That is a fantastic subject. If you're talking, it's more like philosophy. There are subjects that are at risk. Geography will probably be at risk. Music, well, perhaps we'll get another proposition from the deputy to make music compulsory. You know, so this has implications. And unless we look very carefully at the way to work and find a way to work that, then we're not going to get anywhere. And so I will say, the reason that some schools, holier as the... I'm amazed by what the minister said, actually, the previous minister, because I would have thought it would be understood that selective schools can offer more subjects in a way because they are selective. They are selective according to ability. It's the non-selective schools, the children who have been selected, they can't go to a school because of their cognitive tests. They won't go to a school because of their financial ability. But what we're going to say is, but we know best for you, and we're going to get you to do a language because it's best for your brain. So there's been many examples of things that are best for your brain. I can give you a couple of examples. There was something in science called cognitive acceleration through science education. And what it does, sir, ready for the lesson here, sir, is it addressed Piagetian thinking levels. Because one of the problems we have in our society, according to the researcher, proper research, was that 50% of our population never enter formal operational thinking, i.e. you can hold one variable in your head while you're addressing another one. And so the idea was that if we addressed this early in children, there was a set of designed lessons, which I used to teach and we incorporated it, that we would bring children through these levels and they would be better at science and other subjects. And it had some significant success, but it fell out of favour. There was a maths version with a rather unfortunate acronym, which we won't go into, but that one worked as well. And it was a process. So we've been through these. But the silver bullet of education, if you do this, everything will be better, we have to be extremely careful about. And bilingualism. I've got to say, sir, that GCSE is not going to make you bilingual. 25% of it is an oral exam in some of the syllabuses, but I'm sure everybody knows what's in the syllabuses, because everyone's an expert, so I don't have to tell you that, you know. 50% of it is, 75% of it is a written test. Most of them being terminal tests after 2 years, sir, which certainly don't suit some students. But don't worry, sir, because if you have low literacy and you're struggling with all the other subjects, we'll put you into a high literacy lesson and stand you up in front of the class and build your confidence when you can't actually respond to it. That's a great way to teach. That, sir, is the teaching from Victorian times. And modern teachers will be pulling their hair out and saying, do you have any idea what happens in a modern classroom and the challenges that we have with every single student to engage them? So, sir, and there's so many more things that I could say. I got my apology into the Curriculum Council, and when I meet them, I'll apologise to them again, because that was entirely unfair. And I've got to mention one thing. We talk about bias. The Curriculum Council will be biased because it knows about the curriculum. But the APF, which is being used as a political tool in this situation, that's not bias. A group set up to promote French will not be biased in any way in its interpretation and whether or not this is a good idea. So we'll replace a biased, supposedly biased group, the Curriculum Council, which is full of professionals of all sorts of levels, from from higher education all the way down to early years and beyond, and we replace those with people who just simply want to promote French. But this isn't about French, it's about any language. And it's mandatory, but I've heard the Deputy will say it might not be mandatory. It might be for those who can't read it. So is it mandatory or not? And how much will it cost? Well, we don't worry about that. So what we've got is a situation where we could be voting for something where we have absolutely no idea as to what it's going to look like. Or we have an amendment where I will come back next December and say to you, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it could look like, this is the way we can implement it. But as an assembly, we don't want to do that, it seems. That troubles me. Instead, we will impose. I'll finish off with one thing, sir. In terms of the voice of the student, as the previous minister talked about, I have only one voice of the student that's been sent to me. It was conducted last term, school term, sorry, at one of our 11 to 16 schools, because when this was first lodged, which was last summer, it was a long, long time ago, it's been hanging around for ages, they did a survey of their year 9s, and 85% of them said, no, we don't want this to be compulsory because it will get in the way of our choices that we're being asked to make right now. So there's a pupil voice, but we won't listen to that one because it doesn't fit our way. So I ask members to think very, very carefully. Are we going to look at this in an appropriate way before we make a significant change to our curriculum and the opportunities of mostly our 11 to 16 schools, those who face the biggest educational challenges, or are you going to let me do my work, let me and this Curriculum Council, let the Curriculum Council do its work to come back with appropriate ways forward, which I will bring back to this Assembly. That's the choice you have in front of you. If you want to ignore that and just move on regardless, then be careful and be sure as to what you wish for, and I'll come back in the main debate with a lot of questions that I suppose that you can answer. So I ask members to support all parts of this amendment and then we can move forward. Thank you, sir.
Right. Do you call for the appel,
Sir, may I raise a point of order? I'm not sure if it is a point of order or a request to give way. It was something that the Deputy mentioned in his speech. He referred to a study that I quoted, and he used the term phrenology and said that it was like modern phrenology, and I just wanted to ask whether that was appropriate language to use.
I think the reality of it is that that anyone who understands the expression modern phrenology will realise that the Minister is expressing a view that these kinds of researches should be treated with caution, and he doesn't trust them. He's entitled to express that view. Members are entitled to decide whether they agree with him or not, it seems to me.
Would the member give way for a point of clarification of my own speech?
Well, you haven't actually asked if you wanted the appel, but nobody actually said anything. But the reality of it is that, Minister, as you know, at the end, we normally encourage, if there's going to be an request to give way, to stop, not to interrupt the flow of the speech, but to do it at the end. It's a matter for you if you give way. The Deputy wishes to clarify what she said in her speech, which she's entitled to do. If you give way, but not if you don't. Yes, Deputy.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for giving way. I just wanted to add some further detail. The study that I mentioned in my speech was, in fact, a peer-reviewed study which was published in the International Journal of Cognitive Science. It has nothing to do with phrenology, which is a debunked racist pseudoscience.
I think the first point, which is giving more information relating to what you were quoting, is a clarification of what you were talking about. But I think when you move on to comment about phrenology, that's rather turning into a further discussion.
Yes, so I won't say anything else about phrenology. So the methodology was a computerized test, and the sample size was actually 670,000 people worldwide. So it was a very robust study.
Very well. The appel is called for?
Yes, please, sir.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the amendments as read out by the greffier at the beginning of the debate. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 24 votes pour, 20 votes contre, 1 abstention.
The 20, can we have all the votes read out, please, sir?
Those voting pour the connotabs of St Helier, Trinity, St Peter, St John, Grouville, St Saviour, and deputies Southern, Luce, Lehegara, Ayer, Ward, Alves, Farnham, Mezek, Coles, Porray, Curtis, Feltham, Binney, Miller, Howell, Binney, and Andrews, and Deputy Gorst online. Those voting contre the connotabs of St Brelard, St Martin, St Clement, and St Mary, deputies Tadier, Dublé, Gardner, Moore, Osoph, Balash, War, Miles, Renouf, Jearn, Ferry, Kovac, Curtis, Ward, and Wilson. And Deputy Labby abstained.
So could I just ask for leave of the Assembly to withdraw Part D in its entirety, and I'll explain why, sir, is that I think that Part D now is so completely removed from what I had intended. It doesn't give any clear direction to the Minister about whether the States wants him to do this piece of work.
Is this Part D, are you saying?
Part D, so the one that's just been amended.
A review, the consultation,
and
the requirement to study at least one.
And that would then leave us to have a clean debate on parts A and B, which there is consensus around. Otherwise, I think that although if there is a debate, I'll obviously listen to it. I'm probably in the strange position of having to speak against Part D and encouraging members to vote against Part D, because I don't want them to have a pointless review which
So
nobody
you wish
seems to
points
want.
A, B, D and E to continue, is that correct?
So actually, I think C's already been removed, hasn't it?
C's already been removed, you haven't proceeded
So
with
D,
that.
I think E is contingent on D, sir, so I think E and D would both fall away if D is not debated. And then so we would effectively just have a debate on A and B. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think we've had a good debate.
Well, it is true that C would fall away if D is not proceeded with. If D is proceeded with, then fall away. You require the leave of the Assembly to withdraw D, Deputy, because the debate has technically opened. So you propose, you ask to withdraw. Is that request seconded?
Debate on it, sir.
Well, there can be a debate because it's something that requires the leave of the Assembly. And therefore the Assembly...
I'm happy to second it, but I would...
Well, that's a difference as to how you wish to... very well. Does anyone wish to speak on whether or not the Deputy should be given leave to withdraw Part D of his proposition? Deputy Joseph, yes.
I think I understand what the mover is saying. He's effectively, I think, and he may sum up, he thinks that it's effectively the amendment as now adopted by the Assembly effectively means it's nugatory. There's no point in it. Is that, if he could just clarify so that I'm advised to, I'm being in favour of the overall issues.
And Deputy Farnham.
Well, sir, I think the thrust of the debate we've just spent the best part of a day and a half was in relation, I know many members supported the amendment because paragraph D was an undertaking to review this in consultation with the Curriculum Council. I thought that was at the heart of, and with all due respect to Deputy Tadier, so I think it's a case of, well, we'll have a debate, and if we win it, we'll leave it in, and if we lose it, we'll pull it out. And I think I'm not even sure how that process should be allowed in this Assembly, and that's perhaps something we need to review. I've seen it happen very rarely before, where a debate on an amendment is lost and then it's pulled. And I just think I would ask members if they're minded to allow the Deputy to withdraw it, then what we spent the last day discussing that debate pretty much becomes null and void, and we start again. So I'm not sure I am in favour of pulling it, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Balash.
Sir, I must confess that I'm not clear what the proposer of the motion is trying to achieve, and I don't know whether it might be possible for you, first of all, to give some indication as to what exactly is being suggested.
Well, what is my understanding, Deputy, is that Deputy Tadier wishes now, in the light of the fact that it has been amended in a form which he doesn't wish to see proceed, to withdraw from consideration by the Assembly paragraph D as amended, and consequently paragraph E of his proposition. That would leave, quite simply, a debate on A and B and nothing else. I hope that helps. It might be helpful if the greffier were to read what is left in those circumstances, but it may not. So.
Well, the Deputy has taken some of his supporters, this one anyway, by surprise with this suggestion, and I'm not really sure that I understand the full implications of what he's trying to do. I supported him very strongly in relation to the amendment which has just been carried, but I'm not sure that the amended proposition is entirely without value so far as the Deputy's proposition is concerned, and I hope that perhaps he will deal with that in his reply and perhaps a little more detail. I agree that the Minister's summing up on the amendment made it perfectly clear why those members who did not support the amendment should not have supported it. because he gave a pretty clear indication that there were so many problems that were going to be brought to the fore as a result of the proposition of Deputy Tadier that the aim was not going to be achieved. But I may be wrong, and I'm in a quandary.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps I may offer. First of all, I would really honestly want to say to Deputy Balash that that is not the case. I just, sir, want to get this right because I genuinely understand the demands of education. I've spent my life in it, sir. I've been there in the classroom last thing on a Friday with bottom set, having to battle my way through atomic theory. It's not easy, sir. So that was not the case. Perhaps so I can offer an olive branch here, which might be useful for this assembly and for the deputy. I think there is a constitutional point here, and I do agree with this deputy in this. So having brought propositions myself as a backbencher, I always want to keep ownership of that proposition. It's up to me what I do with it, and it's up to the deputy what he does with it. I fully support that. But the olive branches, sir, I did mention in my speech about inviting the deputy, Deputy Kovac, Deputy Morel, or others who have spoken about their concerns to come and speak to the Curriculum Council and do some work with them. Set up a working group with them. Come and talk to us, say, what do you want to see that's different? How can we encourage more people into languages at 11 to 16 schools? Let's start at that point. Let's really promote those languages. Come in and do some work with us. Show what the APF does. Come in and work in that way. And then as we move our way forward, if we get a sense that that compulsory language or those numbers increase significantly, then we can work forward on that. So there's the olive branch. There's the offer from myself as Minister to get this right, to do the most appropriate thing, and to move languages forward. But so that, I think, would be a really constructive outcome from this debate, so that the debate isn't wasted, so we've not wasted our time. And also, so it might repair some of the damage that I think has been done to the Jersey Curriculum Council, which I will repair, and I think it will help do that. So I would suggest that it's entirely up to the Deputy what wants to do, and I think we should support that, but that olive branch is there, that suggestion is there to try and work our way forward in terms of languages, so things aren't lost from this debate. Some of perhaps the political football is, put aside, and we more have a political sit down and a cup of tea, which might be more constructive, and verre de vin, I don't know, and baguette.
So would the deputy give way?
Saucisson.
Kindly.
You're asked if Minister, you're asked whether you would give way.
Yes, I will.
I'm grateful for the deputy, and I'm grateful for the olive branch. I wonder whether he could just, before the proposal to allow the proposition to withdraw, whether or not he would give a clear undertaking that this would be a review that would be conducted before budget arrangements for next year, if there is a financial implication, so that we can be there's no point in working with something that there's no resources for. And if he does that, I'm happy to potentially work with whoever.
That's a legitimate point of clarification.
Yes, thank you, sir, and that's a good point. I have to say to the deputy, I do have priorities that I want to get on with. And it would be nice as Minister to be able to get on with my priorities, because a lot have been put on me. And I've dealt with them, and we've moved forward, and I've done it constructively, and I've got some announcements to come in the next few weeks and months about other propositions that have come forward. What I would say to the Deputy, I'm happy to go through the review work, and I think the first stage, though, sir, I think the first stage for the Assembly is to say that work with how we can encourage French in those 11 to 16 schools. Let's uncover together what it is that makes students not want to do that subject in those schools. When we've done that, and then a review to say we're getting back to stage one as where we are now, where we're just going to impose this at some time. I think there is a middle ground between the imposition and the development and encouragement for languages in the way that so many members of this Assembly want to do. Perhaps so it links in with the stuff about how we go into schools, because I know we all go into schools all the time. So I think there is a middle ground between, and if later on, as we develop that, we can say, actually, this is a time now, well, ideally, we won't need to impose this because it will become a popular subject again and promoted positively by the Assembly without the conflict. It will be promoted positively by the department. I believe we always have, and I certainly have, and I'm a I'm trying to learn French myself. I'm just a bit too shy to speak it, sir. So I can offer that, but the budget thing doesn't make sense to me at this stage because I have real priorities. So priorities of 15 hours of childcare, for example, which is so important to this society. Priorities about some school meals for secondary schools to deal with those. And I don't, sir, want to drop any of those, but we can still do some work to priorities. I would say that perhaps the 2026 onwards, that's the time to do that, sir.
I don't think my question was answered, so I think the answer was no, was it?
I think we must let that. No, I think we must let that rest there. I don't want this to get into a lengthy debate. We're simply debating whether Deputy Tadier may withdraw paragraph D and, as a consequence, paragraph E. Does anyone else want to speak upon that? Deputy Dublé.
So I don't know whether the Minister would be able to respond or whether one of his assistant ministers. In the spirit of an olive branch, would there be any way that Deputy Tadier could be involved with the Curriculum Council and meet with them if he's willing to do so? It's, I like Deputy Balash, I'm not sure on what is the right thing to do here, but it seems that Deputy Tadier's passion might sit well with the expertise of the Curriculum Council.
So, yeah, well, I did say at the beginning, one of the deputy knows the way Curriculum Council works, he's been to it, there are a number of, but I think a subgroup of the Curriculum Council to say, let's look at what the issues are around languages, talk to APF, talk to language teachers, that's a miracle of an idea, and talk to children. Talk to children. Go into 11 to 16 schools. So can we give an example of this?
Well, no, actually, I'm sorry.
All right, sorry.
This is a point of clarification that you were given, and the clarification simply had to be, could Deputy Tadier be involved?
So can I ask for a point of clarification from the Minister?
Really, I mean, if it is absolutely necessary, but you will get the chance to speak at the end.
It is, I'm hoping that it might speed up the end. It is that the Minister said that this is a debate about whether I'm allowed to withdraw my part of the proposition, not about whether I get invited to the department. And because he's pro-choice, would he allow me would he say whether he's in favour or not of me being able to withdraw this part of the proposition?
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Yes, when I said the answer is yes.
Thank you. Right. Does any other member wish to speak on whether or not there should be a withdrawal of paragraphs D and consequently E? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and ask Deputy Tadier to respond.
Thank you, sir. The reason I've asked to withdraw this is not to waste anyone's time. We've had a debate, but I do think, and I'll put it on record, that I think there's been an element of political naivety in the way that some people voted on the amendment, because effectively what we've done is we're not going to have a debate now on whether or not we think as an assembly that languages should be extended, the requirement for languages should be extended to 16. We're deprived of that vote. And the way that Part D is now worded, it says that we're charging the Minister to do a review and consultation by the Curriculum Council about the requirement for students to study at least one modern languages to the age of 16. But we haven't given an instruction about that. We haven't told the Minister that's what we want to happen. And that's why this whole amendment was flawed in the first place, which is what I explained in my one speech when I got to make it about why the amendment shouldn't be adopted. It has been adopted. I'm a Democrat. I accept that fact. But I also accept the fact, this is just the political reality. I know that the Minister doesn't want to do this because we've had several meetings where he's told me and sat across the meeting and says that I'm wrong when it comes to languages, and that's fine. I'm happy to accept that. And he said, you're wrong when it comes to languages, and it's wrong that they shouldn't be compulsory for GCSE. I've been up to the department and I've had the conversation with the lead person for that, and they've also basically told me that it's quite clear that there was no appetite for introducing a GCSE requirement for 14 to 16. So what I'm saying is that we've had the debate now. As a Democrat, I'm a 15, 16-year-old politician. I'm used to losing when I need to, or not when I need to, but I'm used to winning or losing, and I'll take that. I'll congratulate the Minister that he's won the debate. Don't waste the time of the Curriculum Council, because they've got other important work to do, asking them to do something that they don't want to do and that we don't even know if we want to do. That's the bottom line. We've had the debate. Maybe in 2 years' time when there's a different assembly, I might not be in it, who knows? But there might be other members who feel passionately that we need to catch up with the rest of Europe, and someone else will try and bring it back. But certainly if we leave it to the Curriculum Council or to schools themselves, we're just going to go on as we are. That's fine, that's a decision we haven't taken today, and that's what will happen by default, sir. So allow me to withdraw Part D. We've had the debate, it's all on record. I'll make certainly comments about Parts A and B, I think we can move on, sir.
Very well. Is the appeal called for on this? Appeal is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on whether Deputy Tadier should be permitted to withdraw paragraph D of his proposition, which will have the effect, because E is contingent upon it, withdrawing paragraph E as well. I ask members to, well, Grafia to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. I ask the Greffier to close the voting. The proposition is adopted. 34 votes pour, 5 votes contre, 2 abstentions. Very well. Then the debate continues on paragraphs A and B only of the proposition. Proposition was made and seconded. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? If no member wishes to speak on the proposition, your button not working.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Deputy Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I do want to say some final remarks, because I think that Deputy Tadier has actually done ourselves a service in relation to the passionate in that we feel that language education, and I understand his deftness in now having defeated, yes, we've lost the battle, to unfortunately, I think he was right, sir. I think that it's going to be rather strong to say that it was a wrecking amendment, but effectively it was a wrecking amendment, and that's been done, and I'm sorry about that. But I maintain the view that language education is important, and I can only draw from the experience of that I have had, and also the other people who I have learnt languages with. And I believe that the Minister, in his summing up on the amendment that was passed, did not speak once about Jersey and Jersey culture and Jersey's history. And I regret that. I regret the fact that constables, and I said jokingly that I would now recall constables who don't recognise French, I would call them constables, not connétables. I'd like to call them both, because it's both. And the proposition as now brought before the Assembly maintains the issue of French. And what I would say, sir, is that the skill of learning a language is something that, as Deputy Dublé in the amended speech so eloquently made, it's so wonderful to hear Deputy Dublé, a colleague from St Saviour's, speaking with genuine research. I know that if you learn one language at a certain age, your abilities to have the ability to learn another and a second and a third reduces very quickly. There's a number, I can't think of it, but you effectively need 36, if it's 20,000 hours for the first language, your second language is down by a third and then a half and a third and again. So that it is the early adoption of languages, and if it's French, it's fine, it doesn't matter what the language is. And I say to all those members that have a difficulty with French languages are easy, and we're born with the ability to do them, to hear them. I was brought up with the environment of speaking Jersey French. My mother and grandmother, I don't think, realised that the children understood Jersey French. And of course, we understood it entirely. And I could now draw from those reserves, and I can probably address this Assembly if I go for some lessons in Jersey French, because it's my legal right. Languages are a different window on the world. It teaches you respect. It teaches you a different perspective. They say French is the language of diplomacy, and it is. You can say something in French, sir, and the other person absolutely understands it, but it's not so brutal. And I was sorry, and I want to say one thing, that the issue of compulsion was used in the context of the occupation. And that I don't think was, I think we can do better in this assembly than that. And I will just conclude by saying that coercion should not be part of this debate. It should not be something that we should consider, because it's not coercion. We don't compel, as Deputy Adjourned, who made a wonderful speech, said, we don't always do what children want. And I would say to the Constable of St John, I would ask him to recall that the bailiff's medal, sir, that was given to the rector of his neighbouring parish of St Bullard's, the late Reverend Halliwell, who was called to serve to reconcile the people of Jersey after the tremendous issues of occupation. And he did so because he spoke German. And to use the coercive issue, and having gone to being studied in Germany, and having welcomed my mother and father to Germany, and to see the horror on my father's face, I understand that coercion. But when he met my hosts and he heard the story of the German that had saved people from the ghetto in Warsaw 20 times and is now honoured at Yad Vashem, my father's feelings of fear went away. So let us not use coercion in a negative sense. Let us use it in a positive sense. And let us rejoice about the importance of languages, the importance of French, and giving our children and the jobs of the future the dexterous ability that young minds can have to develop skills that they would never otherwise have. So I could thank Deputy Tadier for a good victory in what I hope is going to be an overwhelming adoption of this proposition. I haven't heard, not sensing exactly where this is going. I don't know whether the Council of Ministers is now going to now try to not get this proposition adopted. I hope they're not going to do that. This is my only chance to speak. I hope this Assembly is going to give a thundering approval for what is a good proposition, not a perfect one to some of us, but we can live with that. We're Democrats, sir. And we can say that we've done a good job because we've thought about our past, and we've talked about our present, and we've spoken about our future. And in future budget debates, now we are year-to-year funding, not actually a 3-year, we can put those extra resources, but that's a debate for another day, sir. But I congratulate Deputy Tadier. I thank him and all those members who, like me, have had an experience of language, and that's given me an opportunity to do different things in my life and different things that I would have never otherwise have had to do. And that's whether that can be for all children. And I wish that for all children of this island, wherever they come from and wherever their parents have come from. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I didn't speak on the amendment, but I was surprised, and I didn't speak on the proposition by Deputy Tadier to withdraw Part D. So I've only risen really to ask what the purpose in leaving Parts A and B and R, if the kind of the substantive debate on Part D in Deputy Tadier's view was lost through the amendment, and I supported him in rejecting the Minister's amendment. What is he looking to achieve with Parts A and B? I'm never a fan of this Assembly rubber stamping work that's already ongoing, and the Minister's comments on Part A suggest that this is in essence either doing exactly what's already happening or so we can accept it, but sometimes we also take a view in this Assembly, if it's already happening, we should reject it. And Part B likewise says that they should continue to do something that they're doing. So I would really like to ask Deputy Tadier, what is he looking to achieve in Parts A and B that make it purposeful to keep this proposition in, than what he could have done, of course, which is withdraw the whole thing. We're not debating what is to be withdrawn now. And what does he see each part will achieve? Should they be accepted or rejected? And therefore, could he also ensure that they're taken in parts at the end? So that's all, sir. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I find myself in a bit of an odd position, because I'm actually a little bit disappointed that it's been, that the other paragraphs have been withdrawn. But at the same time, I am happy. So, and I had quite a lot to talk about based on the other two paragraphs that have been withdrawn. But I rise to my feet because I think I am probably in a very unique position and probably the most qualified to talk on this, in a sense that I have been through it as a student, I have been through it as a resident of this island, and I've also been through it as a professional, as a teacher. And also as a teaching assistant, but prior to qualifying as a maths teacher, where I worked with special needs children and children who had, back then the acronym was different, which was English as an additional language. So I am really supportive of these two paragraphs that are left. I was born in the island in the 80s, and at a time where I was probably the only Portuguese person in primary school when I started. And at that time, it was actually almost discouraged. I was discouraged from speaking my home language. I distinctly remember my mum being told actually that she should be talking to me in English at home. And that was the policy and the understanding back then. Obviously, you know, we're talking quite a few years ago now, and things have changed along the way. And I'm glad that they have, and I'm glad that our perception of that and how important having a home language is, or speaking in your home language at home. So I think just to address the points of Deputy Curtis, actually, and I'm sure Deputy Tadier will address them as well, I think for me it's really important that we have a political backing, if you like, that direction of ensuring that home languages are supported within our schools is reinforced by us, because in the past it hasn't been. In the past it was actually the opposite that was happening. And actually on that, I think I was really fortunate. My first language wasn't English. I was born here. When I started primary school, I remember understanding English but answering back in Portuguese, which was quite interesting. I was really fortunate that I had that language, and that growing up, went on to secondary school. At that time, not only was it compulsory, I was the last cohort at Le Caneve that was compulsory to do French, but it was also compulsory to do a humanities, that is out of religious studies, geography and history. Now French for me wasn't really an issue because I was bilingual, I am bilingual, but although being bilingual, I wouldn't say that I'm a linguist. I wouldn't say that my forte is actually in languages, because I didn't go on and do an A-level in languages like a lot of my Portuguese peers did, actually. And I didn't study it at university. I studied maths and IT. But what I will say is that I had to choose a humanities, and I remember sitting there thinking, I don't like any of these subjects, geography, history, or RE. And I actually picked the subjects that I wanted to do based on the teacher that was teaching and which one I preferred. And actually, as a result, I got my lowest grade at GCSE was in that subject, and it was geography. And to this day, that grade is on my CV, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it, because I know that I could have done better if I'd picked something that I preferred. So, and that I knew that I could succeed in. With French, I got lucky. So I was going to go into more detail around that, but obviously the paragraphs that that kind of relates to have now fallen away. But I would say, sir, that I am really supportive of Part A and Part B, and I think it is important that we continue to offer the choice. I think that's a much more inclusive way of doing our education. I think that you know, sometimes I think the rights of the child and doing what's best for is not always just, yes, we have to listen to children, but we know that children aren't experts. We're not necessarily experts. Obviously, that's been brought up multiple times in this assembly. I think this is a much more inclusive approach. I think it is important that we do still continue to offer languages. So I would say that I would urge members to actually support this. I think this, I take on Deputy Curtis's point that, yes, we may be already doing this, but I think this also reinforces the feeling of the Assembly and that we are moving with the times in the sense that things aren't how they were when I was at school 20 years ago. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, sir. I want to speak. This has been a big challenge. It's been a challenge because every time we talk about languages, there is so much criticism, and I want to try and offer some way forward here. I would support parts A and B. I understand what Deputy Curtis has said, but I would ask him just at this time, so I would ask him to try and support this so that we as an Assembly can start to move forward on languages, so that this debate doesn't keep coming back with the constant criticism of either the delivery or the level of them. And I want to offer again to the chair of the APF and members of the committee, to members of this Assembly who are concerned about how we promote languages, to come and work with the department. We have somebody who is employed to be the senior language advisor. I will, in my ministerial on Friday, commit to ask that to set up a working party so that members can be involved, so they can look at ways forward to try and promote languages more. I absolutely agree they should definitely be offered as an option in our schools. I would want to promote them to 11 to 16 schools to our students if they are applicable and the right thing to do, and I will support that. And we will support that as much as we possibly can. So I ask members who have that involvement and interest, please do. And I would also extend that, sir, to say, please come in and see some language classes in the 11 to 16 schools. Please come in and see what's actually happening. You are welcome. We can arrange that for you. If you don't have a DBS check, we'll get you accompanied. We can work everything else out so you can come in and see what's happening. So I want our schools to be transparent. Members in here may politically not agree with me, may politically like me in this position. That's absolutely fine. That's politics. That's life. So, but I'm very serious about doing this job well, about doing the right things and moving education forward. If we can do that together, that's very constructive, and I would ask that to happen. And also, so remove the conflict that is starting to move around languages. It doesn't help us, sir. It doesn't help young people, and it doesn't help us as an education department move forward. So there's another big olive branch. There's another big opportunity here that come from this debate, so it's not wasted, and we can move forward together. I ask members to support these parts A and B, and come and talk to us, and let's get some work done together. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the main proposition as amended? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And just very briefly, just to help Deputy Alex Curtis, I think there's a good constitutional reason why it's okay to vote for parts A and B, even if you regard them as things that are already being done by the department, which is that though the States Assembly is the sovereign policy decision-making body of the island, it obviously doesn't opine on every single policy, and government departments will naturally be proactive in developing their own policies on a whole range of issues, not always coming back to the Assembly to get a mandate for it. And if you at least have a resolution from the Assembly in the form of an adopted proposition, that then becomes the supreme policy in the island, which means it's harder in future to tinker with it. And if you were to tinker with it, you'd then have to come back to the Assembly if you were going to do it. Whereas if it were just a government department policy, ministers as they come and go can tweak it without necessarily having to reference back. So I think there's a fair constitutional reason to say it's okay for the Assembly to have resolved on it in that way.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition as amended? If no other, go to that.
So I think I agree with the point made by Deputy Mezek just now. I think there is a purpose in voting for A and B because it is a very small step forward for those who believe that the teaching of languages is a vital part of the instruction which ought to be given to our children. I believe actually that a majority of members in this assembly probably do at heart think that the teaching of a foreign language should be compulsory for Key Stage 4. I think there was a misunderstanding about the position of the Curriculum Council. The law requires the Minister to consult with the Curriculum Council on any change to the curriculum, so that my objection to the proposition, to the amendment of the Minister was not so much that the Curriculum Council would be consulted, but that it was going to be consulted at such a leisurely pace. And that wasn't a criticism so much of the Curriculum Council, it was a criticism of the Minister and the timescale which he had put in place for that consultation. So I understand the position now of Deputy Tadier. I think that there is a rooted objection within the Minister's department towards doing the things which a majority of members think ought to be done. And the only way in which that will be resolved is when the Assembly gathers together the courage to give a direction to the effect that was sought by the now withdrawn proposition of Deputy Tadier. So I'm going to support with a heavy heart the remaining paragraphs of the proposition.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition as amended? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call upon Deputy Tadier to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'll start off by, I think, addressing the points raised by Deputy Curtis. I wonder if he'd known that there wasn't ultimately going to be a debate on Part D, whether he might have spoken earlier on the amendment. And I suppose the salutary lesson there is to always speak, if you want to, early and speak to what's in front of you, because you might not get a chance otherwise. Nonetheless, I do value his question, and I'll say this. I think it is valuable for the Assembly to give its view on affirming the rights of the children, because we haven't done that yet in this context about early years, not early years, but about home language provision. It's something that we simply allow the department to do and that we leave to schools to do. And we're lucky that at the moment there is a commitment from this minister, and notwithstanding the quite clear disagreement that I've had with the minister and vice versa on this particular issue, we mustn't forget that, of course, on 99% of things, we're completely united in our values and our vision, I think, certainly in our values and in our vision. And it's one of the many areas that he's delivering great work on, and I know which previous ministers have also been delivering great work on. But it isn't something we can take for granted, because a different minister, a different department, different schools might at some point find that their resources are being stretched. And so it's really important that I think both parents and children have their human rights affirmed, so that if they're in a position where they need support in a school and it's difficult to get that, they can go back to a state's decision that's been made, and they can say that on the 5th of February in 2025, the states agreed that all students, both primary and secondary, should receive support from their school to access and develop their home language in accordance with their rights. Which rights? It's the Article 30 of the UNCRC. And this isn't just a technical thing, it's because there are so many fundamental reasons why it's important that children have access to their home languages. And I think that the current education team have been really successful in changing the narrative in the past about the fact that we see, not we, but I think some administrations, some assemblies have been tempted to see multilingual learners, those who don't have English as a first language, perhaps from a young age, as a problem, as a challenge. It's certainly a challenge. It's definitely not a problem. And I've even heard in the past that they were kind of grouped with SEN, with special educational needs, when in fact what we should be looking at, those children, the 27% of our pupils at primary school who don't have English as a first language, is that they are gifted and talented. They have a superpower, and their superpower is that they can already speak another language, but it isn't automatic. Just because they might have a parent at home who speaks Portuguese, Thai, Polish, whatever the language is, doesn't mean automatically they're going to be fluent in that language. They need support in that language so that when they get to school age, they've got the capacity to be able to think and learn, have the building blocks at that age for the lifelong learning that they're going to be doing at a young age. And this is why this whole debate really has been about lifelong learning. And it's about making sure that we have the right interventions at the right time so that you can continue, whether as a child or as an adult, to be able to learn. And I'm reminded of something, I don't mind bringing her in at this point, I didn't necessarily want to refer to her, but something that my wife told me about. She's big into human rights. She used to chair the Amnesty Jersey branch a while back, and she's passionate about education, passionate about children's rights. And she told me about the harrowing story that she had learnt about, where a young boy who ended up, basically, he was being abused, he lost his life. It's still something topical that from time to time we see in the media about a young boy who was being physically abused at home, ultimately died of his injuries. And he couldn't tell the teachers at school or those around him what was going on because he didn't have the language to do it. So this is also a matter of life and death for some students. And if they can't vocalize what's happening to them, that's an extreme circumstance. But if we don't empower students to be able to learn, but also to engage, then we are doing them a great disservice. So that we do have a language policy already. So a language policy exists in the Education Department. And part of the reason that I was slightly perplexed about the reference to the Curriculum Council is the fact that we've already got a language policy advisor, and I think we've got a senior advisor, if I'm not mistaken, has come in recently, who also looks over that. And it should be really those who are leading on this area, not necessarily a generalised curriculum council. If there was going to be a change to be made about mathematics or science, we wouldn't refer it necessarily to the curriculum council, you'd probably refer it to the lead person in that particular area. So we do have a language policy that currently exists, which is still in place. And it quotes, first of all, that students must be encouraged and supported to value their home languages and continue to develop proficiency in them inside and outside the classroom. It goes on to say that a child's first language provides them the roots to learn additional languages, and parents should be encouraged to continue to use their home languages and strengthen and support their children's language proficiency as they join new environments. Now, I know that some members saw, and it's strange, the parts of this proposition which have been controversial in the sense that the members initially looking at Part A and said, well, I'm not sure I can support Part A because it's a great aspiration, but we can't possibly expect teachers to teach the thousands of potential languages that they're going to come across in Jersey just because one student happens to speak this obscure language. Obscure for us, it's obviously not obscure for them. But of course, it misses the fact that there's so much new technology that's available. There are so many ways that teachers who are adept in the classroom can bring in this new technology. It's about supporting and putting in those packages, making sure that actually they're getting the support at home. Also making sure that actually, if they already speak Polish fluently, that they can sit a GCSE in Polish or in Portuguese or in Thai if it's available, and that they can do that perhaps not at the age of 16, but they might be able to do it at the age of 14. So these are all live issues that conversations need to have. And I think that's where I have concerns when things are being left just to schools to do. It seems to me that in some cases there's a free-for-all, if you like, that we allow language positions policy certainly to be dictated by schools. And this is why I think Part B is also really important. Now, interestingly, the Treasury Minister, when she spoke, I don't think she was speaking as the Treasury Minister at that point, said she doesn't agree with Part B. So I'll be expecting her to vote against Part B. because Part B says that the state secondary schools should continue to offer a choice of at least 2 modern languages, other than English, one of which must be French. I've put in there continue to offer because I think that's what they do already by default, but there isn't a diktat, I don't think, anywhere that they have to provide 2 languages. What we do, strangely enough, and we haven't discussed this today and we won't get to discuss it either, is that we have a very prescriptive language policy between the age of 11 and 13, so key stage 2 and 3. The UK, which I don't think is necessarily a beacon of an exemplar, if you excuse the tautology, sir, in this area, it actually says you have to do a language between the ages of 7 and 13, but they leave it up to the schools to decide. And I think that makes sense in their context, because it may well be that French might be the default, but if you live in a particular area where there might be a large Arabic population or whatever population, it might well be that your school wants to make the decision about what language it offers. So there's much more flexibility in the English system. We have a very rigid system here, and I think the political trade-off has been the fact that we're so geographically, historically intertwined with France that French must be the language that must be offered. And of course, because of that, it means that often other languages that could be offered between the ages of 7 and 13 are then excluded, because you can't expect all primary schools and all secondary schools to provide that many languages, especially if they're having to foster and nurture those EAL students, English as an additional language students, who are bringing their richness to the classroom. Now, what I would say is that we've got to start looking at the town primary schools like Rouge-Bouillon, like Plat-Douay, which is not in town. Is it? Plat-Douay's over towards St. Saviour. Samaray, all of those urban schools which have the richness, which means that they conduct a lot of their lessons in an increasingly what we call translanguaging way. It means that you switch back and you make references in the classroom so that differentiation occurs. And this is something that our teachers in schools at all levels do really well. This is why I was quite relaxed, actually, about the request for languages to be extended to up to 16, is because teachers are able to differentiate. They're used to dealing with students who are in love with the subject. They're used to dealing with students who don't particularly like the subject, who are indifferent to it. And one of the key points here is that the success indicator for learning a language, the key success indicator, is not whether you're good at it, it's about whether you're motivated. And you could argue that's the same for a lot of subjects. And if you have a teacher who's dynamic, who's making the content of their lessons really interesting but key relevant to the students, which is in a multimedia way, that's when they're going to want to succeed. And I know that I know it from my own experience, but I also know, for example, when I was at Holia, I loved languages so much that I did a GCSE in Spanish alongside my A-levels, which meant that I was with slightly younger students, and they were all in a class where they had to do a language, so they had a choice, but they were in the Spanish class, not necessarily because they wanted to do Spanish, but because they loved it. But the teacher made those lessons so compelling for all of the students in there that they were able to succeed, but also to enjoy the lessons. And I think that's what we've got to make sure that we encourage and continue that good momentum that we've got in the classroom. And the key thing here is that there was a trade-off. I had some members of the Assembly saying, I would support this if you had made it French compulsory. I've got other members saying, I can't support it if you make French compulsory. So what is the middle road that we have to achieve in Jersey? We recognise the fact that we're still a French-speaking Assembly when we want to be, that French is a really important language geographically, socially, culturally, and hopefully not just historically, and it will increase in that importance and in our relations with the French government in particular, not the French government directly, but the regions perhaps. And so I think it is right that French remains one of those languages that must be offered from 14 to 16. It would be ridiculous, wouldn't it, if we insist that students have to do French up until the age of 13, only to find that a particular school doesn't offer it for GCSE. I think that would be a ludicrous position to be in. So that's why we insist that French be one of those languages. And it's also not prescriptive. Schools, if they want to, don't have to just offer 2 languages. They can offer 3 or 4 if they've got the capacity and the teaching staff to do it. So I think that's why there's the agreement here between the Minister and myself. So I think that's the positive part. That's why, to answer in short to Deputy Alex Curtis, why I'm keeping parts A and B. I think it's really important that the states have a firm decision that they can refer to. and it will be on the record. Now, I do have to make some more general comments in summing up, because we've had a wide-ranging debate today. Not as wide-ranging as necessarily I'd have liked, and it certainly hasn't been as definitive as I would have liked. But to go back to Deputy Ozer's point, and I do thank him for the energy that he's brought to the debate and the, certainly the support he's given for my side of the argument. The other day I was walking through town with my dog. I was doing some research for myself because, as you know, I like to keep a hand in with history, and I was actually preparing for a talk I was going to give to some adult students about who want to become tour guides. So Jimmy and I were walking through Parade Gardens. I've got the photo to prove it. It may already be on social media. And I stopped by the Philip Baudin Memorial, which is in Parade Gardens. And like a lot of those memorials from the time, there's one to Pierre as well, they're bilingual. So you can see that the main language which most people were speaking, the official language, was French. And on the back of it, so in French it says au connétable de Saint-Hélier. And it's talking about the fact that the electorate who elected him several times were reconnaissant, as they usually say, and they built this bust for him and put it on a plinth. Adolphus Curry, incidentally, I think, did the plinth. Might be wrong, might be confusing that with the Queen Victoria one, but I digress. It said that in French, but on the back it said, Philip Baudin, Mayor of St. Helier. So, in fact, I don't think we'd translate Connétable these days as Mayor of St. Martin or Mayor of Grouville. But that's what they did, and they didn't really know how to translate it, because that's what we used to call the Connétable back then. You wouldn't use the word constable, so you'd use Connétable, you'd use Député, you'd use whatever the title was. And interestingly enough, we teach, I hope we teach, but certainly we know students should be taught about the Norman conquest of England in 1066. And what we're going to see in the future, I think, we're going to need to start teaching our students, because it's important to teach them about local history. We're going to need to start teaching our pupils in Jersey about the English conquest of Jersey. Because that's exactly what's happened. This is what's been happening for the last 100 years. And this debate will feature in that timeline. So this will be one of the references that will appear in the history lessons potentially, but certainly on the websites and in the archives, to the day which the States of Jersey didn't take the decision to require students in Jersey to learn a second language, and as an adjunct, of course, to learn the other official language of Jersey, which is French. So we've said it has to be offered for GCSE, but students don't have to take it. We've got this mad situation where they have to study French to the age of 13, but they don't have to study it to the age of 15, just when it's getting interesting, just when you've developed the wherewithal intellectually to make those arguments, to get into the real issues. You've learned how to say, I've got one brother and two sisters, I live in a house, I live in a flat, I've got a dog, I've got a cat, je suis un fils unique, whatever it is. But when it gets to the interesting stuff that you want to talk about fake news, about the threat of cyber attacks, about the environment, about opportunities to go and study abroad, about climate change. You can't do that now. What? But that's getting quite interesting. But no, you have to go and study science. Well, why can't I study science and a language, and then we can talk about climate change and sociology and geography and history and do it in French? No, you don't do that. And what about learning my own language, which is English, and learning the grammar? Because I certainly didn't learn any grammar or syntax or epistemology when it comes to philosophy or any of those ideas until I started learning a second language at a reasonable level. And what do the rest of Europe do? So we have this fake news from my colleague, Deputy Scott of St. Brelard, saying, well, we wouldn't expect the French to force their students to do a second language. Of course they do. We don't use the word force. It's a normal requirement. And I've sent an email to some of the colleagues, is that right across Europe, it's not just one language, it's two languages, and it's usually two languages to 18, not one language to 16. So we've really lowered the bar in Jersey, and we as an assembly today have sent out the message, that's okay. So ultimately, in 20 years, I've done my bit. My conscience is clear, but in 20 years' time, when those constables who have voted for the amendment today are having trouble filling their twinning associations, because nobody is leaving school with any basic French anymore, and the world's moved on, Jersey's become completely anglicised. Don't come complaining to me. I've done what I can for that. I'll continue to support the twinnings in the interim. And when the Assistant Minister for Education says, we're already struggling to recruit language teachers, yeah, go figure. I put that in my proposition. Very clearly, in the proposition, there's a paragraph, which I think somebody might have highlighted. The lack of school-based language learning has a knock-on effect. Fewer language learners in schools result in fewer language students at university, which ultimately leads to a shortage of qualified teachers to teach the next generation. It becomes a downward spiral, a race to the bottom. Oh, we can't find any French teachers. Why do you think that is? Because they're not doing French anymore. It used to be 100 students doing French in one school. Now it's 14. And that's at GCSE, not at A-level. There used to be students doing A-level German. Now you can't find any that are doing it for GCSE. This is the kind of island that we've become. If the Minister for Culture for Jersey identity, is she comfortable with that? At some point I'll be really interested in hearing her view. This isn't just about national anthems. This isn't just about whether you have Liberation Day as your national day. It's about whether you have anything to have a national day about. It's about whether you have anything that you're passionate to sing about in the first place. And increasingly, I don't think we do. I think actually what we'll find is that if you're a monolingual Jersey person who speaks English, your national anthem, mate, is God Save the King, which is a perfectly good anthem, sir, but you don't get anything else. And if you want some of your own culture, you can have your Portuguese national anthem, your Polish one, your Thai national anthem, your Romanian one, the list goes on. But you're separate from us. We need that Jersey identity, and I'm afraid we're losing this. So that's the decision we've made today. I'm a Democrat. We're voting on parts A and B. Parts A and B in themselves are very good. And it's going to be business as usual now for the Education Department. So by all means, I may go and talk to them, but I already know what they're going to say. They already know what I think. We've had the debate. We have the debate in public in this place, and we are the policy makers. Okay, today we've made some decisions, not as many decisions as I would have liked, sir. I leave it there, sir, and I thank members for the debate. I think it's been useful, and call for the appel.
Let's call for, invite members to return to their seats. Sorry. Deputy, do you wish to take them apart separately?
Altogether.
Altogether. All right, the vote will be on all of the parts of the proposition. And ask the referee to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. And I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 46 votes pour, 1 vote contre, no abstentions.
Deputy Tadier voted contre.
Very well. The next item is the Draft Children and Young People Independent Advocates Jersey Regulations, P.87, lodged by the Minister for Children and Families. The main responder will be the Chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Children and Young People Independent Advocates Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 44 and 46 of the Children and Young People Jersey Law 2022.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child states that when adults are making decisions that affect children, children have the right to express their views freely in all matters affecting them, and to have these views given due weight in accordance with their age and maturity. This is not always an easy thing to achieve for certain groups of young people, which is why I'm bringing these regulations to establish independent advocacy services which will empower our most vulnerable children and ensure their voices are heard when decisions are made that will affect their lives. Members will know that the Children and Young People's Jersey Law, which this Assembly adopted in 2022, set out a legal framework designed to promote the well-being and safeguarding and welfare of children and young people. An important part of this law is the introduction of the statutory role of independent advocates, which is defined in these regulations and in the codes of practice which accompany them. The law allows this Assembly to create regulations requiring me as Minister to introduce an independent advocacy service. This service will give eligible children and young people access to a trusted individual to speak on their behalf, effectively and impartially if they need it. The advocacy service brought forward under these regulations will be truly independent from the government or children's services. It will help young people navigate complex systems like child protection, education, and healthcare, ensuring that we can make informed choices regarding important decisions affecting their lives. 6 key principles informed our approach to independent advocacy. These can be summarised as follows. Voice. Every child and young person has the fundamental right to have their voice heard on issues that affect them. Independence. Advocates must act solely in the best interests of young people, free from outside influence, ensuring their voice remains central to all decisions. Accessibility and inclusivity. A child's background, circumstances or needs should not affect their ability to access independent advocacy services. Confidentiality. Advocates must uphold confidentiality, building trust and ensuring that children feel safe and secure in sharing their concerns. A right-based approach. Advocacy must align with the principles of children's rights, ensuring that the best interests of young people are at the forefront of every decision. And professionalism and training. Advocates must be properly trained and equipped with the skills necessary to provide effective and objective support to children and young people. Sir, I am fully committed to bringing forward these regulations and ensuring an independent advocacy service is established and made a statutory right for the most vulnerable children and young people. A strong independent advocacy service is an essential part of safeguarding the rights of our children, which we have committed to do through the ratification of the UNCRC. I see these regulations as a further positive step forward in building a more and just inclusive society for future generations. Sir, I propose the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel would like to thank both the current and previous children's ministers and officers for briefings and for working well with scrutiny on this matter. We are supportive of the introduction of a statutory independent advocacy service framework. We also recognise the good work already done by advocacy services who have contributed to the panel's understanding of this matter. There are several concerns we've raised which have been adequately addressed by the Minister, which can be seen in the comments paper which we've published. There are still a couple of concerns which I'll ask the Minister to respond to in his closing speech, which are, firstly, for clarity around the point that advocacy providers should not deliver other services to a qualifying individual. We are unclear how this would impact advocacy providers who may offer other services like skills and training. Secondly, how does the Minister intend to ensure independence from the government of the Commission's services? We would appreciate answers to these points, but however, the CEHA panel is supportive of the draft regulations.
Deputy Adjourned.
Thank you, sir. And I welcome this regulation, but I just have a few questions for the Minister, if he could respond to. would the Minister be able to explain why the definition of independent advocacy omit any reference to justice and addressing or even recognising that there is an imbalance of power, there's an inherent imbalance of power, or the responsibilities of these advocates to make sure that the vulnerable children and young people not only feel that they've been listened to, but also to show them that when they've said, when they've also spoken about the issues that they're facing, that they can see some changes. And that's the responsibility of the advocate to also show that their voices have been listened to and there is changes happening. Otherwise, this could create an illusion of listening, but without having a framework to ensure that things actually do change and that the people, the young, vulnerable children and young people see that it's worthwhile to speak, because often it's not about just accessing the services, but also keeping that going and ensuring that there is continued support through the advocates and the young. The youth and children see that it's working. I think that's really important. And also the Minister said in a briefing last week that he felt the budget proposed was sufficient, but I just have some concerns in this regard because just asked the Minister how many independent advocates should this budget support, and does he feel this is enough to cover the current amount of children and young people eligible for this service? So not for those that are currently accessing the services, but obviously I'm assuming that there is a desire and a need to ensure that as many children and young people who are eligible for the service also access that. So part of this would be about building that confidence about children and young people to be able to access this service. But does the budget actually cover to support that many independent advocates to be able to support that many children and young people if they take up these services? And lastly, of course, the Code of Practice talks about skills and the importance and the need for the independent advocates to have a range of skills. But could the Minister say, is there enough skill on the island for this desire to have enough independent advocates to support the amount of vulnerable and children and young people that could be eligible for this service? So if they've all decide tomorrow that this is the service that they absolutely should access, do we have skill on the island to take up this professional advocate, and what is the resources the Minister's putting in place to expand that pool of professionals and try to access that from within the island, and to organise and if there is a way to provide on-the-job vocational training to upskill those who are already currently working in this sector, rather than going back specifically having to go back to an education establishment to get those skills. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak. Deputy Ferry.
Sir, thank you. I'm sure the Minister will respond fully to those questions that have been asked, but perhaps in support of that, I can answer Deputy Curtis and Deputy Adjourned's points, and I'm sure the Minister will flesh them out. So in relation to skills and training, of course, an independent advocate by their very nature is independent of the advice they give is completely independent. But of course, there might be crossover in which ways they can help young people develop in their lives. And of course, skills and training are very important features in young people's lives. But those advocates are independent, so they could signpost to organisations that could support with skills and training without actually undertaking that support themselves. In relation to the independence, of course, it is really important, and the Code of Practice highlights how an independent advocate should operate, and the whole point of having it on a statutory footing, because let's remember, this service already exists, and all we're doing is formalising the service. The budget is exactly the same, but what we are doing is making sure it's enshrined in law, is pegged against the code of practice, and the benefits of having that code of practice is that if the independent advocate falls outside of that code, we can take action to make sure that either the contract is withdrawn from that organisation or improvements are made to ensure that they are adhering to the code of practice. There was a question asked about justice, and of course, whilst an independent advocate is in supporting people impartially, young people, they are not an advocate in the legal sense, but when it comes to justice, they're not there to administer or support the justice process, but they are certainly there to challenge injustice in young people's lives and to support them through any process where they might need help, and that could include the court process, but of course they are not advocates in the traditional sense of the court setting, but they can help with the broader aspects of somebody, an individual needing to go through the court process. The number of advocates, we're envisaging something like 3 to 4 advocates would be able to cover the current workload. At the moment, it is being covered by an organisation that provides that support. As I say, the budget is £342,000. That will remain the same. But I just speak now in support of the Minister, and I'm sure he will flesh out those answers more, but I hope that fully answers the points that have been raised thus far. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. Independent advocacy is not just about helping children in need, it's about giving them the tools and support they need to shape their futures with confidence. We must remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring their voices are heard. Deputy Ferry has already covered some of the questions that have been asked, but I will just, perhaps if I look at the code of practice, it may be useful to see for me to say what an independent advocate is and what it isn't. Independent advocacy is about speaking up for and standing alongside individuals, and in doing so not being influenced by external organisations, service providers or personal interest. Providing non-judgmental support and respecting the views of the individual for whom they are advocating, regardless of their own opinions or beliefs. Finding out what makes an individual feel good and valued. Understanding the individual's situation. Offering independent support to assist in telling other people what they want, or introducing them to others who may be able to help. Representing individuals in meetings, hearings, or other formal settings. Helping an individual to know what choices they have and what the consequence of these choices might be. Enabling a person to remain in control of their life, but taking up issues on their behalf, if that is their wish. Independent advocacy is not making decisions for someone, telling or advising someone what they should do, solving someone's problems for them, mediation, counselling, befriending or mentoring, or providing therapy, or a relationship that disembowels people. It is not about providing legal advice, interpreting the law, or representing individuals in a court of law. And of course, you will be well aware that there are other services that provide legal aid to young people. As regards costs, I'm satisfied that the current budget that we have asked for this year will cover what is required, plus some contingency. We will be going out to tender, and of course, in next year's budget request, we will factor in any increase that may be necessary as a result of that tendering process. Qualifications. We do have enough, we do have qualified people on Ireland. However, it's not actually necessary that all the advocacy services would be provided by people on Ireland. One would hope that they would be. We currently use Barnardo's and Jersey Cares. And of course, some of our children are in the UK and therefore would use people from Barnardo's UK services. So I am satisfied we have the qualifications and that people can undertake training on Ireland. I believe Highlands, I think, operate the course and people can work towards a qualification in independent advocacy. I'm just checking that I've covered the questions that were asked. Thank you, sir. And with that, sir, I maintain the principles.
Do you call for the appel?
Can I ask if the Minister will give way?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Deputy.
I did ask, which I don't think has been replied to, about clarity around the point that advocacy providers should not deliver other services to a qualifying individual, which I think is in the Code of Practice, which could potentially be difficult for those providers who do offer other services.
I think we must maintain the independence of the advocacy, and in providing other services that could impact on them. There will be a contract with those who provide advocacy services, and therefore I think there could be a conflict if they were actually offering other services to the children as well. But that would be covered in the contract and the tendering process.
The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the principles of P.87. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 44 votes for, no votes contra, no abstention. Deputy Curtis, I assume the panel doesn't want to call this in? Very well. How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading?
En bloc, sir.
Is it seconded for second reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on second reading? No member wishes to speak. Those in favour of adopting in second reading kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted in second reading. How do you move in third reading?
En bloc, sir.
Is it seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member? Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I apologise for not being in the Assembly for the main articles. I was briefed on it by the excellent presentation that the Minister gave, and I just would, finally, in the third reading, the Minister will know the question that he will refer the word with, not to, in future. Maybe you could say that in summing up.
Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? If no other member wishes to speak in third reading, then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I think that Deputy Joseph makes a very good point. It's extremely important that we don't speak to children and that we work with them. It's important in that respect that the independent advocates do not give regard to their own views when putting forward the views of children. It's absolutely vital that if children are to have confidence in this service, that they are able to see that their views have been put forward, and as we said earlier, that they can see the results of those views having been put forward, and that's why it's important that the dialogue continues with the independent advocate, that they don't just put the views forward, but that continues. And that would continue even after I've perhaps left the service for at least a further 60 days. And I think in that time, if there were any matters, they would see that there have been results. I would like to thank absolutely everybody who's been involved in working on this legislation and the members of the previous government who were involved. I also thank the advocacy providers, which include My Voice, Jersey Cares and Bernardo's, whose contributions were invaluable in developing the codes of practice. My thanks to the scrutiny panel for their support and helpful comments in the paper published last week, and to all the officers who have worked hard to bring this to this point. With that, sir, I maintain the regulations in the third reading.
Very well, those in favour of adopting the appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the adoption of the Draft Children and Young Person Independent Advocates Jersey Regulation in third reading. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. It has been adopted in third reading, 43 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Very well, we come now to the final item of public business, the Draft Children and Civil Status Consequential Amendments, Jersey Amendment Regulations P.89, lodged by the same Minister and with the same responding committee. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Children and Civil Status Consequential Amendments, Jersey Amendment Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 82A of the Children Jersey Law 2002 and Article 82(6) of the Marriage and Civil Status Jersey Law 2001.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And perhaps I must remind myself not to bring two pieces of children's legislation to the Assembly on the same day in future. On 19th March 2024, this Assembly voted in favour of the Children and Civil Status Amendment Jersey Law, which will improve the rights of all children to have their parents recognised in law. It ensures that all parents have proper rights and responsibilities for their children. If approved by members, I am planning to bring this legislation into force later this year via an appointed day act, and I would hope that that will be at the latest in the autumn and perhaps in the end towards the late summer. When implemented, this would provide new routes for same-sex parents and parents using fertility treatments to be recognised in the same manner as all other parents. The law will implement a number of long-standing policy intentions to enable same-sex couples and opposite couples using donor sperm to be jointly registered on their child's birth certificate, to enable same-sex couples to re-register their children's birth to add the second parent's name to the birth certificate, allowing the courts in Jersey to make parental orders for Jersey-born children. This will enable couples who use surrogacy on island to become legal parents without having to adopt their own child, allowing the court in Jersey to make recognition orders for Jersey-born children to retrospectively recognise parental orders already granted by courts in England or Wales. This will provide these families with legal certainty around their parental status. Treating civil partners in the same way as married couples when registering the birth of their child. Removing the customary law assumption that the husband of the birth mother is automatically the father of the child. Married opposite-sex couples will now register the birth of their child together with the father's consent in the same manner as unmarried couples. In order to fully implement this legislation, extensive consequential amendments via regulations are required to recognise these new parents through Jersey law. I would therefore like to propose the Draft Children and Civil Status Consequential Amendments Jersey Amendment Regulations, which are another big step forward to making vital change in preparation for bringing the new law into force. These consequential amendments are wide-ranging. In short, wherever the concept of parenthood intersects with the law, amendments have been required for the new routes to parenthood in the same manner as all other parents. Extensive searches of the statute book have been conducted and has resulted in 180 amendments, both minor and extensive, across 42 separate pieces of legislation. Wherever the law contains provision relating to parents, these would be extended as far as possible to parents via the new routes established in the Children and Civil Status Law. However, the fundamental intentions of each law would not be altered. In 2014, the UK's ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child was extended to Jersey. The Children and Civil Status Law is an important stage in the journey towards progressively realising and improving children's rights. These consequential amendments are an integral stage in implementing the Children and Civil Status Law and the significant improvements in rights that would be conferred by that law. In particular, Article 7 of the UNCRC states that every child has the right to be registered at birth, to have a name and nationality, and as far as possible to know and be cared for by their parent. This is currently infringed upon as one parent in a same-sex couple and couples using certain fertility treatments cannot acquire legal parent status for their child via registration on a birth certificate. It is therefore not possible for both parents to automatically share full responsibility for making important decisions concerning the upbringing of that child. These parents currently need to go through additional legal processes to gain the rights in relation to their own children, and that cannot be correct. This situation can be complicated and upsetting for families who have welcomed a new baby into their families, sometimes after lengthy fertility processes. I am aware that this legislation is complex and it has taken some time and a considerable amount of work to achieve, and I thank all those involved. I would like to recognise the continuous advocacy work of the individuals and organisations championing improved rights for families. I understand that families have been waiting keenly for the implementation of the Children and Civil Status Law, which will provide them with a legal parental status for their own children. States members and their constituents will be keen to hear about the progress made towards implementing the Children's Civil Status Law. Officers are assisting key agencies and stakeholders in preparation for the law coming into force. A communication plan has been written. New processes are being developed for administrating the new routes to parenthood. New court rules have been written. The offices of the Superintendent Registrar will have new registers and new certificates. Websites and information will need to be updated. Pending members' approval, I'm truly hopeful that we can have the law in force this year. As the next step in this project, policy and law drafting work is being conducted at pace to develop primary legislation with the intention of abolishing the status of illegitimacy. This means that children will no longer be labelled based on their parents' marital status. The concept is outdated, discriminatory, and has little relevance for the conferral of substantive rights in the modern world. Legitimacy status has fallen out of step with family life and the principles contained in the Children and Civil Status Law. I therefore feel it necessary to abolish the concept. I hope to bring this legislation before the Assembly in the next few months. We'll also be working closely with the Social Security team to improve clarity and develop some process for Jersey parents who use overseas surrogates and whose children will be subject to overseas parental orders. In particular, some more work is required in regard of these parents' entitlement to parental leave and parental benefits under Jersey law. I do not anticipate that this work will cause any significant delays beyond summer or autumn 2025, and that this will ensure that the package of legislation confers greater rights to all children. I plan to ask the Assembly to bring these laws into force together via an appointed day act later as I previously said, hopefully in the summer, but by the latest in the autumn of 2025. Sir, I propose the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Tadier Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And again, I'd like to say the Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel would like to thank both the current and previous children's ministers and officers for briefings and for working well with scrutiny on this matter too. The panel published a review of the draft Children and Civil Status Amendments Jersey law last year when the law was approved by the State's Assembly. Now we have the draft regulations and the panel is supportive and looks forward to the Appointed Day Act. We appreciate this. This has been a huge body of work for officers, making approximately 180 amendments. There is, though, some legislation which is not included in the amendments, and these are the laws around legitimacy. This concept, when used to describe a person, is abhorrent, and in our 2024 review, we made a recommendation in relation to the status of legitimacy that the government should undertake a review to consider the relevance of the laws around this. My understanding is that the government is now working separately to remove references to legitimacy in Jersey law, as the Minister has just referred to. And I understand the intention is for this work to be revised by scrutiny before the Appointed Day Act is lodged for the enactment of the amendment law. So I asked the Minister to confirm this. But above all, the panel is supportive of the draft regulations and looks forward to them coming into effect.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. And I agree with the comments of the scrutiny chair around legitimacy, and that was something that I wanted to raise myself. I have a couple of things that I would like the Minister to respond to when he sums up, and just to clarify on the Appointed Day Act, and it does relate to the legitimacy issue. So could the Minister clarify, the initial target was for a summer debate on the Appointed Day Act. So I believe that the Minister said that may now be the autumn. Is the reason for that the legitimacy work? And further to that question, I'd like to understand a bit more around the legitimacy work that is being undertaken. And I want to echo the comments of Deputy Curtis, because I completely agree that concept is absolutely abhorrent. And I think when I've had conversations with people about this, many islanders aren't even aware that that concept of children being legitimate or illegitimate even exists anymore in our legislation, and in many other jurisdictions it's been abolished. And as far back as 5 or 6 years ago, this was something I was advocating for, and was told all along that it wasn't possible to do at the same time as this legislation without significantly delaying it. And I know there have been difficult decisions taken by previous ministers, including Deputy Gardner and myself. And I was told that it wasn't possible to do that work and to revise the laws on legitimacy without delaying the main law. So what I would like to understand from the Minister is at what point did he give the steer to officers to do this work, and how have they been able to do it a lot quicker than I was led to understand, and for which I'm grateful, because I think it's extremely important. And just a bit more information around that process and how that happened. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that decision, but I would like to understand in more detail what has changed and exactly how long it's going to set back the Appointed Day Act. Another point I would like to raise, which I have raised in previous debates, and I'm not certain if this has been picked up by either the Children's Minister or the Health Minister, but one of the provisions within the law which has been approved is the need to use a fertility clinic to access the rights, which, of course, the rights aren't yet enforced because we have to approve these consequential amendments, and then the next and final step will be the Appointed Day Act. But if and when the Assembly approves that Appointed Day Act, couples who I'm sure will be delighted to have these rights, same-sex couples will still have some barriers to accessing those rights. And one of those barriers is financial. So if you have a couple, two women who want to have a child together and they want to access these parental rights, they have to use the ARU, the Assisted Reproductive Unit. They have to go through an official clinic setting to achieve those rights. They can't just kind of do it informally with a friend. And I have been contacted on this because some couples do not have the financial means to go through the steps required to access the free IVF. And I'm aware that there have been massive improvements in that area, for which I'm grateful. But for same-sex couples, they have to access IUI before they can access IVF, and there is a cost associated with that. I'm told that that cost is around £1,000. So it's not going to be the end, I'm afraid, once we have these amendments approved and the Appointed Day Act. There is still some work to be done on ensuring that there is true equality for same-sex couples. So I would like, perhaps the Health Minister could comment on it during the debate. I think that I would like to see the Assistant Health Minister perhaps consult the Women's Health Group on this. I'd like to see what they say about it and what could be done, because I don't think there should be a cost for couples accessing these rights. So those were the questions that I had and the kind of issues I wanted to raise. Very minor, I think, some of them, but important nevertheless. And in a general sense, these consequential amendments, I have actually heard them being referred to as it's simply a formality. And it often is, isn't it, when we've debated the principles of something in some primary legislation and we get these consequential amendments. But I wanted to kind of challenge that today and draw members' attention to the significance of these consequential amendments today, which do go hand in hand with the main piece of legislation that we have already approved. Because the areas of law that we will be amending today are so broad and so wide-ranging, and they encompass things like the criminal child abduction laws, data protection law, gambling law, fatal accidents law, marriage laws, mental health laws, nursing home law. I could go on, and there have been further areas added since I was overseeing this work, which shows what an absolutely thorough job the officers have done. And it's one of the biggest legislation projects ever undertaken in Jersey. And to my community, to the LGBTQ plus community, which I'm part of, and I know there are other members who are part of that community, to my community, the approval of these consequential amendments today is hugely significant, because it signifies our society taking another step away from the hurt, the discrimination and the trauma of the past, where LGBTQ plus islanders were denied the chance to live full lives. They were denied the chance to marry. They were denied the chance to have children, and sometimes they were denied their freedom because of who they loved. So I cannot underestimate, sir, how grateful the community is for this legislation. And I will thank again all the ministers and officers who've worked on this and all who have campaigned for progress. And to my colleagues, sir, today, to members of the current Assembly, I hope that we can vote for this unanimously and see it as a collective achievement of our Assembly that we can all be really proud of. And I'm going to end by giving voice to some members of our community that I've been in contact with. And the first quote I would like to make is from St. Helier parishioners, and they mentioned to me that they recently had a daughter, and they say, "We are unquestionably both her parents. My wife came to every appointment, every class, painted the nursery and prepared for her arrival in the same way as a heterosexual couple would do. She supported me through labour and was the first person to hold our daughter and cut the cord when she arrived. She feeds her, changes her, cuddles her when she's sad. As it stands under Jersey law, she has no legal recognition as her mother. On a very basic level, our daughter cannot have my wife's surname, as we had hoped she could. When we registered her at the GP and for nursery, I had to specify that my wife was allowed to be contacted regarding our daughter and that she can take her to any appointments. When we go on holiday, a worst-case scenario could be that something incapacitated me. My wife would not be permitted by authorities to look after our daughter or return with her to Jersey. As it stands, if the unthinkable happens to me, the default position would be that my own parents would have more rights to care for our daughter than my wife would. The inequity has made us consider leaving Jersey for the UK, so that should we have any more children, we will not experience the same issues. As an island with a falling birth rate and an ageing population, Jersey should be doing everything it can to make sure younger working people like us feel welcome and want to stay here. Our daughter has a right to parity with her peers in terms of her birth registration reflecting both her parents. And a final quote that I'd like to read is from two St. Saviour parishioners. The passing of this law and the consequential amendments are so immensely important for families like my own and for the children of same-sex families in the future. From my own personal circumstances, myself and my wife-to-be have our son, who is just under 3 years old, and he does not yet have a correct birth certificate with us both named as his parents. The passing of the consequential amendments will allow the law to come into force, which will correct this situation and allow us to re-register his birth retrospectively. So we will then both be his parents from a legal standpoint and both acquire parental status. There are no words to truly explain how these changes will positively affect our family. To put it simply, in the eyes of the law, we will be accepted as a family unit and our son will have a legal document acknowledging both his parents. I'll end there, sir, on the words of some same-sex parents in our community and urge members to vote for these consequential amendments.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow my colleague from St Saviour because this really is, after a difficult debate maybe early on about the past and the future, this is really a vote about equality for families and for Jersey's future. And I strongly support these regulations. They do, as the Minister and the speaker before me have said, they ensure that all children, regardless of their family structure, will have the same rights, protections and legal recognition. It's not just about fairness, it's about the reality of Jersey today in all of those mayoral districts or parishes or whatever they are. Families take today, sir, many forms. When I brought the marriage and civil status law to the States, I think in 2002, I couldn't have imagined that we would be amending it and all these other regulations that we could do. I couldn't have imagined that people like me could be fathers in the plural, but they could and they should, and that this is about making that easy. Families today take many forms: same-sex couples, surrogacy, assisted reproduction. They're part of our life, and we must have laws to reflect that, which is why I'm rising to speak briefly. And the reason why it's particularly important is because our birth rate is falling, our population is ageing, and we need to ensure that we've got families who wish to raise children and how that those families are supported. And we're recognising those new routes to parenthood. Members may have watched the television over the period of New Year and Christmas. There was a heart-wrenching drama about a single-sex couple, a male gay couple, journey through adoption and highlighting the challenges and joys that they experience. And if members haven't seen it, I would commend it to them. Lost Boys and Fairies was the subject. We must remove unnecessarily legal hurdles for loving parents who want to bring up children in our island. No parent should have to adopt their own child. And these changes, of course, bringing us into line with modern jurisdictions, and they respect the international commitments of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I commend the Minister for bringing forward that and thank them on behalf of all of those people that I know that never realised that they could be parents, but that dream can come to them, and it can come to them in a completely non-discriminatory way. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles, Deputy Ferry?
Thank you, sir. And just again to field some of those questions before the Minister speaks, particularly on legitimacy. So lots of work has taken place over the sort of second half of last year on the subject of legitimacy. And there is still some work to be done to determine the parameters of the saving provisions where the status of legitimacy would still be relevant. An example of this is officers are investigating customary law, honours, titles and manorial rights. And due to the complexity and historic nature of these areas, the abolition would not be retrospectively applied to prevent any impact in the succession of a person who died before the commencement of the draft legislation. So there is some complexity to this piece of work, obviously, as I'm sure members will understand. But we also do have some good options to draw on from the UK and how it's been applied in the UK and disentangled. So perhaps that, I'm sure the Minister will speak further on his summing up, but that's my understanding of the situation, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Conatable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I have one comment to which I think I do know the answer, but from my days in legal practice, if I recall it, the question of the marital status of parents is relevant to the domicile of a child, in the sense that, in general terms, a child born to parents who are married will take the domicile of his father or her father, and when unmarried, that of her mother. I think I'm right in believing that the extent of these provisions does not extend to the taxation provisions, and I do emphasise the taxation aspect, but perhaps the Minister in his summing up could kindly confirm that.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. And first, I'd like to thank everybody who's spoken. So, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody who has spoken. There have been some excellent speeches, in particular Deputy Tadier. I would like to thank her for her speech. Looking at, firstly, I'll cover the matter of any delay with the Appointed Day Act into possibly the autumn. It's not necessarily due to the fact that we've now worked in tandem really on the legitimacy law. Towards the summer of 2024, we realised that we were actually making very good progress on the legitimacy law and other areas, and therefore the decision was taken, perhaps shortly after that, that we would if we were able to, we would bring the Legitimacy Act and the Appointed Day Act to the Assembly at the same time. The delay is more relevant to the fact that I think we found another 17 bits of legislation that required amending, so it went up from I think around 27 to 40, from around 25 to 42, and I think that has been the main area which has caused some delay. Nevertheless, any delay will be relatively short, and it will be the autumn rather than the summer. If we can get it in for before the summer break, then certainly we will do so. I will certainly have to speak with the Health Minister about the additional costs to some couples, or the £1,000 that Deputy Tadier mentioned with regard to provisions for fertility and fertility clinics. There shouldn't be financial barriers, and so hopefully we can have some discussions with the Health Minister in that respect. Taxation, I believe that the Deputy of St Mary is probably correct that this doesn't cover the taxation area, but I'm sure the officers, if I'm wrong on that, the officers will correct me and we'll look at that. So this law, or the draft children and civil status consequential amendments regulations, further progresses towards realisation of the rights of children to have their parents recognised in law. And I probably just can't understand what a relief and joy that will bring to couples. I remember the birth of my own children, and the fact that they can be recognised as parents, be named on the birth certificate, have all the same rights, will bring tremendous joy to them, having been denied that in the past. The work has been complex and has taken time to develop, as I've just said, and it continued developing during 2024. Again, I recognise the continuous advocacy work of the individuals and organisations, the officers that have been involved, the law drafting department, and these consequential amendments are another big step towards making vital changes and bringing joy to those parents. So with that, sir, I maintain the principles.
You call for the appel?
I call for the appel, sir.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the principles for P.89. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted, 46 votes for, no votes contre, no abstentions. I take it the committee doesn't wish to bring this in, Deputy? No. Very well. Do you wish to move the matter in second reading? Do you wish to take them en bloc or do you wish to en bloc? Is it seconded for second reading? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on second reading? Deputy Ferry? No member wishes to speak in second reading. Then I close the debate. Those in favour of adopting in second reading, kindly show. The appel is called for. Again, I invite members who may have rushed out in the last few minutes to rush back in. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. The vote is on second reading for P.89. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The articles have been adopted in second reading, 46 votes for, no votes contre, no abstentions. Do you propose in third reading? I do, sir. Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Those in favour of adopting in third reading, kindly... The appel is called for. The vote is on third reading, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The legislation is adopted in a third reading, 46 votes for, no votes contre, no abstentions. Very well, that concludes public business. I call upon the chair of PPC to propose business of the future arrangements.
Thank you, sir. The arrangements of public business. For the first time ever, we only have one, well, since I've been chair of PPC, we only have one item on the agenda for the 25th of February, which is P.88 States of Jersey Development Company pre-sales provisions for residential developments and pre-lets provisions for commercial developments. P.78, which we were going to discuss at this meeting, has been moved to April the 22nd. So I make the arrangement of business.
Members approve the arrangements for future business? Very well, those arrangements are approved. That concludes the business of the Assembly, and the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 on the 25th of February.